Welcome to Dreamland Encounters, where we dive into the hidden stories of UFO and alien encounters across the United States. Our journey takes us through quiet towns and military bases, uncovering tales that whisper of the unexplained. These are stories not told with fear, but with a sense of curiosity that invites you to explore the mysteries above. On a cold, gray afternoon at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport, something extraordinary was about to unfold. November 7th, 2006 started like any other day. Jet engines roaring, ground crews in neon vests hustling across the tarmac, runways glistened with early winter drizzle. Flights moved smoothly, right up until the moment something unusual appeared near Gate C-17. At first, only a few airport employees noticed. A mechanic walking beneath a United Airlines jet suddenly stopped, staring upward. Hovering silently above the concourse was a perfectly round, metallic object. No lights, no sound, no wings. This was unlike any aircraft anyone had ever seen. Stationary and seemingly observing, the object caught the attention of those working nearby. Word spread quickly. Pilots, ramp workers, and gate agents turned their eyes skyward. One ramp employee described it as a grey-silver disc, hanging motionless just below the cloud ceiling at about 1,900 feet. Then, without warning, the object shot upward with incredible speed, punching a visible hole through the thick, overcast layer. Witnesses compared it to a circular cutout in the sky, revealing a patch of clear blue above the grey. The hole remained for several minutes before gradually closing with drifting vapor. At least 12 United Airlines employees reported the sighting, which lasted approximately 5 minutes. Interestingly, no passengers seemed to witness the event, or at least none came forward. The encounter was limited to airline and ground crew personnel with a clear view of the sky near Gate C-17. What began as an internal discussion at United Airlines quickly spread. Employees began reaching out to the National UFO Reporting Center, MUFON, and the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, bringing this extraordinary moment to light and sparking widespread curiosity about what exactly had occurred that day. Rumors circulated quietly among aviation professionals about an unusual sighting. John Hilovich, a transportation reporter at the Chicago Tribune, first learned about the incident through United Airlines source and began investigating. 2 months later, in early January 2007, Hilovich published a detailed article that sent ripples through national media. The report was measured and compelling, drawing from multiple anonymous witnesses who were United Airlines employees. These weren't typical UFO enthusiasts, but trained professionals who spent their lives identifying aircraft and following strict protocols. Aviation experts described an object that defied conventional explanation. A United Airlines manager had filed an internal safety report shortly after the incident. Employees were instructed not to discuss the sighting publicly. One pilot who witnessed the object from the cockpit, though not authorized to speak with the press, later confirmed the sighting anonymously to investigators. The FAA's initial response was immediate and dismissive. Spokesperson Elizabeth Isham Corey told the press that no unusual object had been recorded and no radar confirmation existed. However, persistent efforts by investigative journalists like Leslie Keane eventually forced the agency to release internal communications. Freedom of Information Act requests gradually revealed a more nuanced narrative. While radar logs showed no unusual activity, email chains between United and FAA officials told a different story. Internal FAA correspondence acknowledged the incident with a mix of seriousness and nervous humor. One email dated November 8 described a spinning disc-shaped object approximately 700 feet above Gate C-17, completely silent and disappearing vertically at high speed. FAA managers' subsequent emails ranged from concern to sardonic. One asked, "Do we really want to deal with this?" Another joked about needing an alien ID badge. Despite the official stance, the credibility of the witnesses made this case particularly intriguing to many observers. The O'Hare Airport UFO incident has become a landmark case in UFO research, particularly because of its location and credible witnesses. At a major transportation hub with strict monitoring, an unidentified object hovered in restricted airspace, defying standard aviation protocols and challenging official explanations. Despite the clear sighting, the FAA remained dismissive. They suggested a hole punch cloud as the explanation, But meteorologists quickly contested this theory. Such cloud formations typically develop slowly and show distinct characteristics like ice crystals and light refraction, none of which were present during this event. Furthermore, the cloud theory couldn't explain the disc-shaped object's prolonged hovering. Alternative explanations like experimental drones, misidentified balloons, or optical illusions were proposed by skeptics. However, these theories failed to match the object's reported behavior, shape, or sudden departure. No military or private organization claimed responsibility for any aerial activity in the area at that time. Aviation regulations mandate that unknown objects in controlled airspace be logged and investigated as potential safety threats. Yet in this instance, agencies not only ignored the incident, but also failed to record it officially. This response raised significant suspicions about potential cover-ups or intentional disregard. The incident's significance grew over time. It became a frequently cited example of professional witnesses encountering a UFO in broad daylight at a major airport. Documentaries, books, and aviation conferences featured the case. Decades later, during public hearings on unidentified aerial phenomena, pilots and officials referenced the O'Hare incident to highlight the need for improved reporting procedures. The United employees who witnessed the event remained remarkably consistent. Most initially avoided further discussion, letting the original account stand. As years passed, some retired workers began speaking more openly about their experience. Their unwavering testimony, combined with the lack of credible official explanation, continues to intrigue researchers and UFO enthusiasts. The credibility of the witnesses and the unusual circumstances surrounding the event have ensured that the O'Hare Airport UFO sighting remains a compelling mystery in aviation history. Joe R. reflected on the event years later in a podcast interview. A moment so strange, so beyond explanation, that it defied everything professionals knew about the world. At O'Hare Airport above Gate C-17 on a cold afternoon in 2006, something impossible happened. A circular hole appeared in the clouds when an unidentified object shot upward, witnessed by airport workers and passengers in nearby planes. A United pilot reported the symmetrical clearing to the tower, bewildered by what he saw. Weather data from that day confirmed no natural explanation for the sudden cloud disruption. The FAA radar reportedly detected nothing unusual, at least that's what the public was told. Since then, attempts to recreate the scene using CGI have failed to capture the precise silence of the actual event. Today, travelers rush past Gate C-17, unaware that hovered there in defiance of known physics. Whether it was a drone, an experimental craft, or something not of this world remains a mystery. In the controlled chaos of one of America's busiest airports, amid concrete and radio chatter, the sky opened briefly and silently, and something impossible flew away. The Hudson Valley UFO wave from 1982 to 1986 began with a simple phone call. A woman from Hopewell Junction told the dispatcher about something hovering silently over the trees behind her house. Within minutes, more calls flooded in. A man driving on Route 9 reported a triangular shape with massive lights. Just after 9 p.m. on March 24, 1983, the Yorktown Heights Police Department was overwhelmed. By 9:30, roads were lined with stopped cars. People stood on lawns, in fields, and on rooftops, all watching the same thing. A vast, silent craft studded with multicolored lights crept through the night sky like a ghost made of steel and glass. This wasn't a one-time event or a hoax. What started as an odd report in late 1982 would become something much larger, a phenomenon that would not simply disappear. The Hudson Valley UFO wave became a widely discussed phenomenon marked by hundreds of sightings and thousands of witnesses. New Year's Eve in 1982 brought the first major incident to public attention when residents of Kent and Brewster, New York, witnessed something extraordinary. Witness described a massive boomerang-shaped craft with rows of lights moving silently just above the treetops. Some saw it pass directly overhead, while others watched it hover long enough for neighbors to gather outside. Local police departments, especially in Putnam and Dutchess counties, were inundated with calls. A deputy responding to a potential downed aircraft report found no debris but confirmed something unusual had occurred. Throughout 1983 and 1984, sightings increased dramatically. The aerial descriptions remained strikingly consistent: a V-shaped or boomerang-like object with white and multicolored lights that sometimes blinked or rotated. These craft were always silent, sometimes hovering for minutes before accelerating rapidly and vanishing, occasionally appearing to follow roads or glide along river valleys. On March 24, 1983, over 300 residents across multiple counties reported seeing the object. Many described the same pattern, a slow appearance, lingering overhead, then drifting away without sound. Some estimated its size as large as a football field. People stopped their cars, stood on hoods, and pointed in disbelief. Notably, witnesses included professionals from various fields: engineers, scientists, and pilots. A local air traffic controller, speaking anonymously, admitted watching the object through binoculars and being unable to identify it. The craft did not appear on radar. A CBS News crew arrived in April 1983 to interview witnesses. Their broadcast featured multiple accounts, including a retired commercial airline pilot who insisted the object was unlike anything he had ever seen. He emphasized its ability to move in complete silence and hover motionlessly, traits unknown in fixed-wing aircraft. Photographers gradually emerged, though many were inconclusive. A few long-exposure images captured light patterns consistent with a large craft, adding to the mystery of the Hudson Valley UFO wave. Now, one notable photograph captured by amateur astronomer Andrew Grunwell depicted an arc of lights moving across the night sky in a consistent curve, suggesting a solid object rather than multiple planes. The week-long series in the journal News in May 1984 published interviews with over 50 witnesses, including police officers who were initially skeptical but began taking the reports more seriously. Local law enforcement officers started acknowledging the phenomenon after responding to multiple calls and witnessing the object themselves. One officer described it as a floating city, huge, slow, and completely silent. Meanwhile, skeptics pointed to a local group of ultralight aircraft enthusiasts led by Howard Stein, a Poughkeepsie man and licensed pilot. Stein's group had reportedly flown formations with colored lights attached to their aircraft. In later interviews, he claimed many sightings could be attributed to their stunts, particularly flights launched from a private field in Stormville. However, researchers and witnesses pushed back against this explanation, noting that ultralight aircraft have significant limitations. These limitations included restricted range, inability to hover, safety restrictions on night flying, and challenges with carrying large lighting equipment. The craft simply could not match the silent flight characteristics described by numerous trained observers. Aviation expert Philip Embro investigated the incident, interviewing witnesses with extensive military flight experience. These professionals were confident they had observed a single massive object with coordinated lighting, not a group of small planes. Supporting their testimony, air traffic logs from Stewart Air Force Base and Westchester County Airport showed no unusual military or commercial activity during peak sighting times. FOIA requests to the FAA and NASA yielded no information about classified activities or experimental aircraft flights in the region. By 1985, the frequency of sightings had decreased, though they had not completely ceased. Investigators from the Mutual UFO Network, MOFON, and the Center for UFO Studies, say UFOs, had conducted extensive field research, mapping sighting locations and creating a coherent timeline of events that occurred primarily on clear nights every few weeks. Isolated UFO reports continued through the 1990s, consistently echoing earlier accounts. A significant late sighting in 1992 near Pine Plains captured the essence of previous encounters, a slow, silent object gliding above a rural, witnessed by a mother and her teenage son. Their detailed drawings aligned perfectly with dozens of similar illustrations collected years before. Over time, this phenomenon gained widespread attention, with books, documentaries, and articles extensively documenting the Hudson Valley wave. J. Allen Hynek, before his death, reviewed early reports and considered them among the most credible he had ever encountered. The consistency was striking. Thousands of credible witnesses observed something extraordinary in plain sight, just north of New York City. What made these sightings remarkable was not just their frequency, but their openness. As a retired engineer who witnessed the object in 1984 stated in a 2007 interview, "We didn't need proof. We all saw it with our own eyes." Hynek noted the lack of psychological indicators suggesting mass hysteria. No official explanation emerged, no experimental craft matched the described behavior, and no hoax could account for the scale and duration of these sightings. The Hudson Valley UFO wave remains one of the most compelling examples of multi-year UFO activity in the modern era. After 1986, the sky fell silent again, yet for many witnesses, the memory remained vivid and unexplained. The phenomenon had etched itself into their collective memory, a mysterious chapter of unexplained aerial encounters that defied conventional understanding. The Edwards Air Force Base intercept in October 1965 would add another layer to this enigmatic narrative. The Mojave Desert's nighttime stillness, typically broken only by distant wind turbines or occasional flight sounds, was about to be disrupted. At the base, surrounded by dry lake beds and dust-swept runways, a controlled environment would face an unexpected intrusion. In early October, a small, steady, silent light hovered low over the western edge of the base perimeter. At first glance, it might have been mistaken for a distant aircraft or weather balloon. However, its movement defied such simple explanations. The object held its position against the wind, its glow subtly shifting from white to amber, adapting to the darkness. Security personnel at Post 12 were about to witness something extraordinary. The Western Patrol Points first logged the sighting just after 9 p.m. Two other posts reported the same light within 5 minutes. It held its position in the sky with an unnatural precision, hovering over restricted airspace well beyond the normal flight line. As time passed, it began to move. Initially, the shift was subtle, almost gliding laterally. Then came sharp, geometrically exact movements, impossible for known aircraft. No engine noise accompanied its path, which didn't align with wind-driven objects. At the control tower near Rogers Dry Lake, air traffic controllers stepped outside with binoculars. Maintenance crews near Hangar 3 paused and looked up. Multiple observers watched the object perform a slow arc above the dry lake bed, pivoting midair before holding steady. One witness described a disc-like shape, dark at the edges with a pale glow underneath, as if light emerged from within rather than reflecting off the surface. The call went out to George Air Force Base. Two F-106 Delta Dart interceptors were immediately scrambled toward the western slope. Orders were explicit. Visual confirmation only. No engagement. No radar lock. Within minutes, both pilots made contact. From the air, the object appeared exactly as described, stable, softly, glowing, completely silent. One pilot noted a dome-like metallic shape where light seemed to slide across the surface instead of reflecting. The other felt the object was monitoring their approach. As the jets closed in, the object rose, not gradually, but with acceleration no known aircraft of the time could match. It ascended vertically, turned sharply westward, and vanished over the ridge line. Both pilots lost visual contact within seconds. No radar registered its departure. Back at the base, the incident was thoroughly documented. Written statements were collected from tower staff, maintenance crews, ground security, and interceptor pilots. Weather conditions were reviewed. Clear skies, light wind, no anomalies, no scheduled military or civilian aircraft were in the area. A check with the FAA confirmed nothing was aloft in the sector that night. Internal reports categorized the event as an anomalous aerial object with non-ballistic movement. Non-unscheduled flight sortie was logged at 21:17 hours on October 7, 1965, designated as a Type 3 scramble, code for visual intercept based on ground reports. Within 48 hours, an Air Force officer from Wright-Patterson arrived on site. Though unnamed in internal correspondence, he was affiliated with an operational wing of Project Blue Book. He privately interviewed the pilots, with ground observers not re-interviewed. No forensic sweep of the airspace or runways was conducted. The report was classified as a Class D case, unexplained, multiple corroborated visual sightings with no corresponding radar or known platform. A brief radar technician note, declassified years later, stated visual confirmation by tower and patrol. The object showed non-reflective maneuvers inconsistent with fixed-wing or rotary platforms. Radar readings were negative with no secondary emissions. In an internal memo dated October 9, 1965, a base intelligence officer wrote that the object demonstrated controlled movement and significant acceleration beyond known test parameters. He recommended no further dissemination beyond immediate command. No press release or official public mention followed. The incident remained sealed, just another file in a locked cabinet of unexplained sightings. Years later, civilian UFO researchers using FOIA filings linked the event to Edwards. Interviews with retired personnel provided additional context. A former maintenance crew chief recalled being told not to log the observation formally, only to note that training activity had temporarily paused. One tower observer, years after retirement, described the flight as too smooth and deliberate, saying it was like watching a machine that didn't care if we saw it or not. The story faded quickly within Edwards. No second sightings were reported. Intercept flight logs were quietly removed from routine circulation. According to one account, the pilots who responded that night were reassigned within the year. The Edwards case lingered in classified archives, unresolved and forgotten, until Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, declassifications and independent cross-referencing brought scattered details to light. By the 1980s, Project Blue Book had closed, leaving this incident buried and unexamined. The pattern wasn't unique. Just days earlier, a similar sighting occurred at Vandenberg Air Force Base, a glowing object over a test range, witnessed by multiple people, with no radar tracking and no sound. No official connection was made, but for analysts tracking such incidents, the proximity in time and geography sparked significant interest. Experienced observers trained to recognize every sky shape and behavior watched something that defied categorization. There was no confrontation, no airspace protocol violation, no photographic evidence, no telemetry, just an inexplicable event. A retired radar specialist summarized it years later. We had the best detection systems in the world. That night the systems didn't matter. We couldn't see it, but everyone else could. In the vast, dry silence of the Mojave, things often pass unnoticed. But this wasn't one of them. The light came, it lingered, and when challenged, it left without a trace, without a sound, without explanation. Some stories are classified because they're sensitive, others are buried because they simply don't fit. This one was both. The Kelly Hopkinsville encounter, August 21st, 1955. Kelly, Kentucky, USA. The August air in rural Kentucky was warm and still, with crickets carrying the night's rhythm across open fields. At the edge of the small farming community, a white wooden farmhouse stood quietly among pastures and scattered trees. Inside, the Sutton and Taylor families and their friends were gathered for an ordinary summer evening. Billy Ray Taylor, visiting from Pennsylvania, stepped outside to draw water from the well. Crossing the yard, he noticed something unusual in the western sky, a bright silvery object moving silently, descending in a low arc toward distant trees. Its glow was steady, its movement smooth, and it made no sound above the chorus of insects. He watched it vanish beyond the trees, then hurried back inside to tell the others. The family listened, but at first remained unconvinced. The night had been calm, and no one expected anything out of the ordinary. Not long after, the dogs began barking sharply, drawing several people to the windows. Not a faint glow drew closer, catching the attention of some who stepped onto the porch to get a better look. A small figure emerged from the shadows, barely 3½ feet tall, with an oversized rounded head and large luminous eyes. Its body gleamed with a metallic sheen, and long arms nearly touched the ground, ending in talon-like fingers. The legs were short and thin, and the figure moved with an eerily smooth, deliberate glide. Startled by the strange sight, the group quickly retreated inside and bolted the door. One of the beings approached, stopping just short of the porch steps. A shot rang out, and the small figure flipped backward. Instead of falling heavily, it seemed to float to the ground before swiftly disappearing into the darkness. No cry of pain, no sign of injury. Suddenly, a noise from above drew attention to the roof. Billy Ray looked up to see another figure peering over the eaves, its glowing eyes fixed on him. Another shot fired, but the figure slipped out of sight. Moments later, it appeared at a side window. Again, a shot was fired, and the being vanished, only to reappear from another direction. This pattern continued for 2 to 3 hours. The beings circled the house, moving from window to window, roof to fence line. Their movements were unnaturally smooth, not walking, but gliding over the ground. Aside from occasional scrapes of claws on wood or tin, they made no sound. Inside, the family kept lights on and weapons ready. From different vantage points, several people sometimes saw more than one figure at once. Their eyes were the most striking feature, bright, reflective and unmistakable in the lamplight. Eventually, the visits became less frequent. Seeing an opportunity, the family gathered into 2 cars and drove to nearby Hopkinsville. Their number and serious demeanor convinced local officers to investigate immediately. The farmhouse was soon surrounded by local police, state troopers, the sheriff and military police from Fort Campbell. They searched the grounds thoroughly, moving through fields and around the house with flashlights. Spent shell casings were found, along with bullet holes in window frames and scratches on the roof. Yet mysteriously, no footprints or tracks were discovered, despite the dry, firm ground. The Hopkinsville Goblins case began with officers meticulously interviewing witnesses, each providing an identical account. They described small beings with distinctive features, large heads, luminous eyes, long arms, and a metallic sheen. Their movement was deliberate, yet silent. Witnesses consistently reported the creatures as more inquisitive than threatening, repeatedly approaching the house without attempting forceful entry. Police remained on site until daylight. Just before departing, one creature was spotted near the tree line. Its metallic reflection was still visible in the morning light, though it quickly retreated into the woods. News spread rapidly. Reporters flocked to the farm, and newspapers soon christened the incident the Hopkinsville Goblins case, a label the witnesses themselves disliked. Debate emerged between skeptics and supporters. Skeptics proposed the beings were misidentified great horned owls, pointing to their glowing eyes and silent movement. Supporters countered that owls couldn't explain the being's size, metallic appearance, apparent resistance to gunfire, or coordinated movement around the house. Researchers were drawn to the case's unusual characteristics. The encounter's length, multiple witnesses, and consistent descriptions set it apart. This wasn't a momentary glimpse, but a prolonged event observed simultaneously from different perspectives around the property. Project Blue Book did not investigate, as no conventional aircraft was reported. The Suon family found the attention overwhelming. Neighbors responded with a mix of avoidance and curiosity. Strangers continuously visited, hoping to witness something extraordinary. Eventually, life returned to normal, though the night's memories remained vivid. Today, the farmhouse is gone. Open ground now covers the site, with changed fences and fields. Yet the landscape retains its quiet essence. For those who heard the story directly from witnesses, the details remained unchanged. Small beings with luminous eyes and metallic skin, moving with precise quietness around a rural Kentucky farmhouse. The reason for their arrival remains a mystery. Were they simply curious, perhaps connected to Billy Ray's reported sighting? They departed without causing significant harm, leaving only minor physical evidence and deepening the enigma of that extraordinary night. The Morristown UFO wave is remembered not just for the phenomenon itself, but for the ordinary people who witnessed it. Their accounts have remained consistent for decades. On a still Kentucky summer night, the story begins to unfold. In January 2009, Morristown, New Jersey became the center of an unexplained mystery. The suburbs were quiet, holiday lights still hanging, when commuters returning home noticed something strange. Just after 8 p.m., reports started flooding in about unusual lights in the sky. Witnesses described a soft red flicker that transformed into something more complex. Some saw glowing red orbs floating silently, initially motionless, and then drifting in what appeared to be an intelligent formation. The lights seemed to defy explanation, moving against the wind, forming a distinct V-shape, hovering in ways that didn't match typical aerial phenomena. Local authorities and federal agencies were quickly overwhelmed with inquiries. Cell phone videos emerged, and even a nearby pilot reported seeing the unexplainable lights. The mystery spread rapidly across the northeastern corridor. The initial sighting was just the beginning. Over the next weeks, on January 26th, February 7th, and February 17th, the lights returned. Each time, they appeared over different neighborhoods, drawing crowds of bewildered and sometimes frightened residents. Witnesses consistently described glowing spheres hovering high above the town, moving in straight lines or forming intricate geometric patterns before vanishing. One mother who witnessed the February 7th event captured the collective sentiment, "They weren't like anything I've ever seen. They didn't blink. They didn't move like planes. They just floated together, almost like they were watching us." Local television coverage expanded the story's reach. and soon national audiences were intrigued. Amateur UFO groups launched investigations while skeptics proposed alternative explanations, from aircraft to weather balloons to potential publicity stunts. Then came the unexpected twist. In early March 2009, two men, Joe Rudy and Chris Russo, self-proclaimed skeptics and science educators, stepped forward and claimed responsibility for the lights, dramatically changing the narrative of this mysterious event. Two local men, Rudy and Russo, claimed responsibility for a series of mysterious light sightings that had captivated the Morristown area. They described their actions as an elaborate hoax designed to test public and media gullibility. By attaching flares to helium balloons and launching them from specific locations at precise times, they created a spectacle of clustered lights in the sky. Their detailed confession included video evidence of their backyard experiments, showing balloon preparations, launch sequences, and the distinctive orange glow of flaring. Local police conducted a brief investigation and ultimately fined the pair for disorderly conduct and unauthorized airspace activity. However, the story didn't end with their confession. Anomalies quickly emerged that challenged their explanation. FAA radar logs from nearby Newark International Airport reported unexplained activity during the peak sighting periods on January 5th and February 7th. Air traffic controllers confirmed no authorized balloon launches or aircraft in those areas at those times. Eyewitness accounts further complicated the narrative. An off-duty commercial pilot described lights that moved with unprecedented intelligence, maintaining altitude, hovering, and circling in ways impossible for simple balloon-mounted flares. Other witnesses noted the lights' unusual behavior, which defied typical flare characteristics like rapid descent and flickering. Independent researchers conducted comprehensive video analysis in late 2009, comparing the public footage with controlled balloon flare test launches. While some visual elements aligned, critical differences remained. The light's duration, positional stability, and synchronized movement suggested a phenomenon more complex than a simple hoax. The revelation divided public opinion. Some accepted Rudy and Russo's explanation, finding their detailed account convincing. Others remained skeptical, pointing to the mounting evidence that suggested something more extraordinary might have occurred over Morristown that winter. Multiple FAA logs recording anomalies, residents witnessing objects defying balloon physics, and pranksters abruptly halting a seemingly successful stunt. These inconsistencies raised deeper questions about the Morristown Lights incident. Rudy and Russo admitted responsibility for only 3 nights of activity, despite eyewitness accounts and radar data confirming sightings on additional dates. When challenged about these discrepancies, they dismissed them as coincidences or overactive imaginations. Yet even skeptical investigators remained unsatisfied. Throughout UFO history, disinformation has been used to confuse the public or redirect attention from sensitive airspace activities. The Morristown case became a potential textbook example of such tactics. A retired military analyst, speaking anonymously, explained the strategy. You have a real incident, then drown it in noise. Stage a similar hoax, and discredit both. That's how you erase something from public memory. In 2012, a documentary titled The Morristown Lights explored the case extensively, interviewing residents, aviation experts, meteorologists, and even Rudy and Russo themselves. The film blurred the line between hoax and reality, leaving room for alternative explanations. While acknowledging the prank, the documentary hinted at broader possibilities. Rudy and Russo largely vanished from public view after its release. Years later, one of them briefly posted online, "We did what we did to prove a point, but it got out of hand. Maybe we shouldn't have." Some residents remained steadfast in their convictions. A retired school teacher, now in her 80s, recalled the January 5th event with unwavering certainty. "They came," she insisted. "I don't care what those boys say. I saw something in the sky that wasn't from here." The fundamental question persists. If not all sightings were hoaxes, what did people actually see? The answer continues to elude consensus. The Morristown UFO wave's most captivating element wasn't the lights themselves, but the public response. Mystery can spark imagination with startling speed, and truth becomes remarkably fragile when tangled in hoaxes and sensational headlines. More than a decade later, the incident remains unresolved. Was it a prank? Perhaps the reality lies somewhere between certainty and speculation, obscured by fire, helium, and our own deeply held assumptions. In 1992, a quiet night in Redlands, California, would change everything for Frank Ramirez, a fourth-generation farmer in the local citrus belt. Just before midnight, he stepped outside to investigate a strange light hovering near his fields. His typically brave dog refused to leave the porch. Sensing something unusual, Frank squinted toward the distant rows of crops. The light remained perfectly still, bright, low, completely silent. This wasn't a star or plane. It pulsed as if alive, then moved in ways no aircraft ever could. Dipping and drifting, it descended gently toward the property's far edge before vanishing just above the tree line. No explosion, no wind, no sound. But by morning, something was terribly wrong. Frank's thriving alfalfa field now bore a scorched circular patch nearly 30 feet wide. Grass had collapsed outward in a precise spiral pattern. The circle's edges were discolored, as if exposed to extreme heat, with blackened stubble and ash at its center. What began as a simple crop burn soon attracted state investigators, private researchers, and whispers from law enforcement. On August 18th, Frank had been repairing fencing when he first noticed the unusual southern light. Initially dismissing it as a helicopter during the hot evening, he realized something extraordinary was happening when the light remained stationary hours later. The Redlands case transformed from a quiet local mystery into one of the strangest unsolved incidents of early 90s California, a close encounter leaving behind physical damage, missing evidence, and endless questions. Note: a farmer named Frank noticed something strange in his field that wasn't behaving like a typical aircraft. Moving with unexpected precision, the object hovered absolutely still before shifting in sharp angular patterns, up, sideways, and back again. Frank later compared its movement to a mouse cursor on a screen, quick, then suddenly motionless. Though he didn't report it immediately, the damage to his field eventually compelled him to contact the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. The deputy investigated and photographed a circular area pressed into the alfalfa, seemingly by immense weight but without any vehicle tracks. The grass was flattened in a clean radial pattern, with the center burned black. After filing a basic report, the deputy mentioned notifying March Air Reserve Base. However, nothing materialized. 3 days later, 2 men in unmarked clothing arrived, identifying themselves as Department of Agriculture representatives. Frank, believing they were sent by the county, allowed them to take soil samples from various locations, the center, edges, and undisturbed perimeter. They left without providing contact information. When Frank followed up with the county the next day, they had no record of dispatching any team. Local reporter Sandy Clean learned about the incident through sheriff's office contacts and interviewed Frank, taking her own photographs. Her article, "Farmer Reports Mysterious Crop Damage," ran in the Redlands Daily Facts. An intriguing detail emerged during film development. Frames captured near the crop circle's center were fogged with white static patterns. Other photos taken minutes before and after remained perfectly clear. Sandy's Nikon F81S had no history of malfunctions, and a local shop confirmed the camera's integrity. Within a week, the story reached the Los Angeles MUFON chapter. Investigators arrived with specialized equipment, Geiger counters, soil testing kits, and magnetometers. Their findings were startling. The soil at the burn area's center showed elevated magnetic disturbance, while not radioactive lab analysis revealed evidence of extreme temperature exposure through fused silica particles. The site showed unusual characteristics that defied simple explanation. Plants near the circle center displayed clear cellular damage consistent with sudden intense dehydration, a condition impossible without extreme heat or energy exposure. Under microscopic examination, some leaves revealed completely exploded cell walls. The grass blades were particularly intriguing. They weren't randomly trampled or cut, but precisely bent at the base in a consistent clockwise pattern, suggesting a controlled force was at work. By mid-September, similar reports emerged from 3 neighboring farms within a 10-mile radius. Witnesses described bright hovering lights, low-altitude movement, and strange animal behavior. One rancher reported his goats breaking through fencing and witnessing a disc-shaped object passing over a nearby hill. Another farmer noted his dogs refused to enter a specific part of their grazing field, following an unexplained sky flash. Official responses were minimal. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department offered no further comment. The original report was never made public, and Freedom of Information Act requests were denied due to incomplete records. March Air Reserve Base confirmed no low-altitude military exercises occurred in the Redlands area during that time. Media coverage remained limited. The year 1992 was dominated by political events, natural disasters, and international conflicts, making a crop circle in a quiet farming town seem insignificant. Yet among researchers, the Redlands case stood out distinctly. Unlike many UK crop circle reports that were later revealed as hoaxes or art installations, this formation appeared genuine and unexplained. The incident was singular. It arrived without warning, was witnessed by few, and left behind measurable environmental changes. Independent laboratory results from the research team, quietly published in a 1993 symposium report, suggested exposure to a directed energy source capable of rapidly altering plant tissue without burning surrounding areas. The circle's edges were remarkably clean, with no fuel residue or evidence of human interference. Frank Ramirez, the landowner, never sought publicity. He didn't write a book or give television interviews. Instead, he continued farming for another 15 years, consistently telling anyone who asked, "I saw what I saw." July 1992, in a California field, a quiet event etched itself into UFO lore. That night of August 18th saw something hover silently, leaving behind a perfect circular burn in the earth. Researchers would later call this a classic close encounter of the second kind, an incident marked by physical evidence and unexplained phenomena. The Redlands case stands as one of North America's few domestic UFO encounters where a single witness event included physical traces, electromagnetic disruption, and soil damage. All without official federal investigation, the lingering mystery burned as deeply as the scorched ground itself. Jump forward to September 3rd, 1965 in Exit, New Hampshire. A different night, a different scene, but another strange encounter was unfolding. Officer Eugene Bertrand Jr. was on patrol near Route 101 just after midnight. The countryside was dark and still, with only tree rustling and distant insect sounds breaking the silence. Something caught his attention, an urgent, unusual dog barking. Pulling over, he found a young woman sitting in her car, visibly shaken. She explained that a large, silent object had just descended from the sky, hovering above her vehicle with blinking red lights in a circular pattern. Her dog was agitated, and she was too frightened to move. Bertrand listened carefully. The woman wasn't hysterical, but calm and adamant about what she'd seen. He took a statement and let her go, thinking it might be a low-flying plane or a trick of light. Yet something didn't feel right. Less than an hour later, another report came in, this time from an 18-year-old named Norman Muscarello, who had been hitchhiking home from his girlfriend's house in nearby Amesbury. On a night in Kensington, a strange event unfolded that would challenge everything people thought they knew about the skies. While in the field, a young man named Muscarello spotted something extraordinary. At first, it looked like a burning house with a brilliant red light pulsating in the darkness, flickering in an unusual pattern. Then the object revealed itself. A massive, silent craft rose from behind the trees, hovering low over the field. 5 powerful red lights pulsed in sequence, and Muscarella could clearly see its metallic structured underside. Overwhelmed with fear, he dropped to the ground. When he looked up again, the object remained motionless, watching. It then drifted silently across the road. Terrified, Muscarella ran to the nearest houses, pounding on doors. Getting no response, he continued to a farmhouse and called the police. At the station, Officer Bertrand was surprised by the teenager's arrival. The young man was visibly shaken, breathless, and recounting a story similar to one Bertrand had heard earlier. This wasn't a typical prank. Muscarella's account was detailed and precise, describing the lights, the hovering, and the unnatural silence. Bertrand decided to investigate personally, taking Muscarella in the police cruiser. They were joined by Officer David Hunt at the scene. What happened next would become legendary. As they swept their flashlights across the dark field, they suddenly froze. Rising above the treetops, exactly as Muscarella had described, was a large object with 5 bright red lights. The lights rotated in a circular motion from left to right, casting eerie shadows and bathing the trees in an unnatural glow. The craft began to move. It drifted toward them, hovering silently, passing overhead before disappearing behind the tree line. Muscarella shouted, while Bertrand and Hunt stood in stunned silence. This was real. Returning to the station, Bertrand carefully documented the incident. He was meticulous, avoiding speculation and simply describing what they had witnessed. A large, silent object with 5 red lights that moved without any visible propulsion. It didn't resemble any known aircraft and made no sound. Word spread quickly. Within hours, Pete's Air Force Base sent investigators to interview the witnesses. What had started as a routine night had become something extraordinary, a moment that would challenge understanding and spark countless questions about what might exist beyond our known world. In the initial report, military officials proposed that the sightings were caused by B-47 bombers flying in a standard formation. However, Bertrand, Hunt, and Muscarella emphatically rejected this explanation. Bertrand, a trained observer and veteran, was adamant it couldn't have been planes. The lack of sound, absence of vibration, and the ability to hover silently while flashing red lights in a rotating pattern were key indicators. He went on record with his disagreement, and Hunt and Muscarella did the same. The Air Force shifted its explanation, suggesting temperature inversion might cause stars or planets to appear as moving lights. This explanation only intensified the witnesses' frustration. They were certain these weren't stars or misidentified celestial objects, but a solid, structured craft with deliberate movement. Civilian UFO researchers, including the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, NICAP, took notice. Their independent investigation uncovered additional witnesses who reported similar occurrences in the area during MENT that night and the preceding days. Residents near the exit described glowing skylights, low hovering objects near power lines, and silent discs moving in ways unlike any known aircraft. Some witnesses reported even more extraordinary details, lights peering into windows, panicked animals, and vehicles inexplicably stalling. Despite the Air Force's continued stance of misidentification, the case remained prominent. What set this incident apart was the credibility of its witnesses. 2 trained police officers and a civilian teenager, all providing independent yet consistent accounts. The encounter was both unexplained and unforgettable. In 1966, it was referenced during congressional hearings on UFOs, becoming a focal point in civilian efforts to push the government toward taking sightings more seriously. The Condon Committee, a scientific panel assigned by the U.S. Air Force to study UFO reports, briefly mentioned the incident in its final report, though without reaching a definitive conclusion. Years later, Bertrand and Hunt remained steadfast. Neither ever altered their testimony or offered alternative explanations. Bertrand's memorable quote captured their conviction: "I'll never forget what I saw. And I know what I saw was real. The field where the sighting occurred still exists, just off Route 150, surrounded by woods." Locals are familiar with the story, with some claiming their own unusual experiences. The night of October 26, 2002, in Harwinton, Connecticut, would become etched in local history as something extraordinary unfolded. At 9:47 p.m., a frantic 911 call came through, the caller's voice trembling. "It's above my car. I can't move. It's just hovering. I swear to God, something's out here." The dispatcher tried to calm the caller, but the line suddenly went dead. Officer Robert LaRusso, working on a routine patrol report, received the transferred call and was quickly in his cruiser heading west toward Route 118. Multiple witnesses that night reported strange phenomena. Teenagers Ashley R. and her cousin Daniel, both 17, were walking their dog near North Road around 9:30 p.m. They spotted a weird glow breaking through the trees, descending in complete silence. Initially thinking it might be a helicopter, they realized something was different. 3 glowing spheres hung evenly spaced, forming a perfect triangle in the sky. "I wasn't flying, was waiting, watching," Daniel later recounted. Nearby, Farmer Greg Whitman experienced his own unusual event. While locking his shed, he noticed his floodlights blinking before cutting out completely. When he turned around, 3 white lights hung motionless just above the tree line. The Harwinton Nightlights incident remains one of the most compelling UFO encounters in American history. Not because of sensational alien theories, but because of its remarkable simplicity. 3 credible witnesses saw something they couldn't explain. They were brave enough to report it, and despite attempts to dismiss or rewrite their account, their story has never changed. These lights defied logic, bright white orbs with pulsing blue centers that hovered silently, leaving behind more questions than any official investigation ever answered. Something not from this world had come extraordinarily close to the quiet farming community that night. The encounter challenged everything people thought they knew about unexplained aerial phenomena. The witnesses didn't claim to understand what they saw. They simply stated that something was there, something that didn't belong. In the quiet town of Harwinton, an extraordinary night unfolded. At 9:52 p.m., Officer LaRusso pulled up near South Road and witnessed something remarkable. 3 brilliant lights hung motionless in a perfect triangle, utterly silent and defying explanation. His radio transmission crackled with urgency. "Dispatch, this is Unit 3. I've got eyes on 3 stationary, no noise. This is no aircraft. Repeat, this is no aircraft." Without warning, the lights pivoted and shot upward at an impossible speed, vanishing before LaRusso could fully comprehend what he'd seen. But the night's strange events were just beginning. Mike Donnelly and Sarah Weiss, out jogging at Harrington Golf Club, suddenly found themselves enveloped in an intense blue-white light. Weiss experienced nausea and breathing difficulties. Donnelly, a former U.S. Army medic, noted his ears rang for nearly an hour, and his skin developed a peculiar sunburn-like redness where the light had touched him. A digital watch mysteriously stopped at 9:58 p.m. Then came the driver's call from Route 118 that escalated the incident. His vehicle stalled under a bright hovering light, only to restart moments after calling 911 when the light disappeared. Over the next 2 days, Harwinton Police Department received over a dozen independent reports. Each account consistently described the same triangle-shaped light formation, an eerie blue glow, and an unnatural silence. The Mutual UFO Network quickly dispatched an investigation team. They collected soil samples, recorded witness testimonies, and discovered scorched tree bark at the original sighting location. Even more intriguing, several trees showed chemical changes in their leaves and bark, suggesting exposure to extreme heat or radiation. A retired local electrical engineer requesting anonymity provided a personal measurement log revealing a power grid fluctuation at 10:01 p.m., precisely matching the Route 118 incident. Additional research uncovered an internal memo from Connecticut Light and Power Company documenting 2 unexplained electrical surges. The night's events remained an enigma, challenging conventional understanding and leaving more questions than answers. The Harwinton Nightlights incident remained a persistent mystery, challenging typical UFO narratives with its remarkable consistency and unexplained nature. 2 separate sightings occurred on the same night, each happening just minutes apart at 9:43 p.m. and 10:22 p.m. Initial investigations revealed no scheduled maintenance or storm-related causes. The FAA initially reported no radar irregularities, but this claim was later contested by an anonymous air traffic technician from Bradley International Airport, who admitted detecting a brief radar anomaly. Officer LaRusso's dashcam footage, which mysteriously disappeared after his cruiser underwent routine maintenance, became a key piece of potential evidence. LaRusso ultimately left the police department, and when contacted a year later, would only cryptically state, "I know what I saw. So does my department." Multiple witnesses, including Ashley, a teenager who first spotted the lights and later became a nurse, maintained their accounts. Ashley's perspective remained steadfast. People might laugh about UFO claims, but those who were present that night would understand differently. Unlike many UFO stories fraught with inconsistencies, the Harwinton Nightlights stood out. The lack of natural or military explanations lent credibility to witnesses' accounts. To this day, the police report remains sealed, the dashcam tape unrecovered, and the sightings unexplained. Yet on quiet fall nights, Harwinton residents still look skyward, wondering if those mysterious lights might return, not to entertain or announce themselves, but simply to remind a select few that something unexplained once visited their quiet Connecticut town. The incident echoes other unexplained encounters, like the Portage County police chase of April 17, 1966, where mysterious phenomena challenged rational explanation and left witnesses forever changed. The pursuit began as an ordinary patrol shift, but quickly transformed into one of America's most publicized UFO chases. Officers Spar and Neff found themselves tracking a mysterious metallic oval-shaped craft that defied conventional aircraft behavior. The object hovered silently about 100 feet above the tree line, bathed in an intense glow with a domed top and wide, flat bottom. Radio dispatchers buzzed with excitement as multiple police cruisers joined the chase, which would span over 85 miles and cross state lines into Pennsylvania. The craft moved with an almost playful intelligence, speeding up when pursued, hovering when officers stopped, always staying just ahead or just out of reach. Passing through rural towns like Atwater, Randolph, and Alliance, the chase caught the attention of neighboring county dispatches. East Palestine police officer Frank Panzanella confirmed visual contact, and rumors suggested a civilian photographer captured images, though those photos would later vanish. At moments during the pursuit, the object demonstrated extraordinary capabilities. It would dart upward at astonishing speeds, pause midair, and then descend smoothly. Spohr would later describe it as if the craft was deliberately toying with its pursuers. As they approached the state line, radio communications began to suffer interference, with static interrupting their signals. Near Conway, Pennsylvania, just outside Pittsburgh, the nearly 90-minute chase concluded dramatically. The craft suddenly accelerated, ascending with incredible speed and disappearing into the upper atmosphere. Its departure marked the end of the physical encounter, but the beginning of a much larger story. National media erupted. The Associated Press ran the story coast to coast with headlines like "Police Chase Flying Saucer 85 Miles." Reporters swarmed the Ravenna Sheriff's Department and TV crews clamored for interviews. Officers Spohr, Neff, and others who witnessed the object provided statements, drawing the attention of the Air Force and ultimately becoming part of Project Blue Book's investigations. In the aftermath of a mysterious UFO encounter, a U.S. Air Force investigation unfolded with representatives interviewing key witnesses Spohr and Neff. The official Blue Book explanation was straightforward: a satellite or perhaps Venus. However, this conclusion fell flat with those who had been present during the incident. The explanation simply didn't match the witnesses' accounts. Venus doesn't hover over trees, fly at low altitude matching a police cruiser's speed, ascend to supersonic velocity, or cast bright white beams illuminating an entire forest. Spohr publicly challenged the Blue Book summary, calling it laughable and insulting. The professional and personal fallout was immediate and devastating. Spohr's life began to unravel. He became reclusive, struggled with paranoia, and eventually divorced. Neff also withdrew from public view, and other officers were instructed to maintain silence about the event. Within months, the incident disappeared beneath layers of denial and forgotten press clippings. Yet decades later, independent researchers revisited the case. They were stunned by the meticulous documentation, radio logs, visual confirmations from multiple jurisdictions, and consistent witness statements all aligned. Years after the event, journalist James Mosley interviewed Spohr, finding him deeply emotionally scarred. Spohr's haunting words revealed his personal toll. "I ruined my life. All I did was see something I couldn't explain." The Portage County chase became a significant case in UFO literature, often cited as one of the best documented law enforcement encounters in the modern UFO era. Skeptics continue to suggest alternative explanations, proposing atmospheric phenomena or unusual aircraft, but Spohr and Neff never retracted their story. In the years following, officers in rural Ohio and Pennsylvania privately shared accounts of strange skylights. Some referenced the Portage County case with a sense of hushed reverence, as if it marked a boundary between routine policing and inexplicable phenomena. The incident even inspired a scene in Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, further cementing its place in popular culture. Not August 27, 1979, an extraordinary event unfolded on a quiet highway in northern Minnesota that would become one of the most enduring mysteries in American UFO history. Deputy Val Johnson of the Marshall County Sheriff's Office was conducting a routine patrol in the early morning hours, traversing the flat farmland of the Red River Valley near Warren. The story begins with a cryptic radio transmission. "Dispatch, I've been hit. I don't know what it was." Johnson's voice was calm but shaken, breaking through the radio silence of the night. His brief, seconds-long call would mark the beginning of an investigation that would challenge everything known about unexplained encounters. The Portage County incident had long been a significant reference point for those studying unexplained phenomena, with filmmaker Steven Spielberg citing it as an influential account of law enforcement confronting the unknown. This new case would prove equally compelling. Johnson's encounter occurred on State Highway 220, a stretch of blacktop typical of the region, flat, empty, under a vast open sky. At 1:40 a.m., something extraordinary happened. The details would become legendary. A bizarre crash, record injuries, physical damage to his patrol car, halted electronics, and a witness who would never change his story. Fragments of official documents, including Blue Book files, have been partially revealed through FOIA requests. These records contain the original statements of witnesses like Dale Spar, who passed away in 1983 without ever recanting his account. Critically, the officers involved were consistently described as calm, competent, and well-respected in their departments. The object remained, and remains, unidentified. Not a plane, not Venus, not a weather balloon, and not acknowledged by any agency. What it was is unknown, but its impact was profound. It changed lives and continues to challenge our understanding of what might exist beyond our current knowledge. For those who chase the impossible, like Spar and Johnson, the pursuit is driven by an unshakable commitment to understanding. Their stories echo down the back roads of America, testament to encounters that defy explanation yet demand investigation. Not a night of the incident near Stephen, Minnesota, Officer Johnson was on duty when he received a report about a possible aircraft or strange light descending in the area. Changing course, he began investigating but never completed the call. 10 minutes later, Johnson radioed back reporting that something had struck his vehicle, leaving him injured and his car disabled. Assistance was quickly dispatched. When help arrived, they found Johnson sitting in his Ford LTD patrol car, conscious but disoriented. The scene was puzzling. The windshield was smashed inward, the hood was dented, and the antenna was bent at a sharp angle. Most peculiarly, both Johnson's wristwatch and the car's dashboard clock had stopped at exactly 2:19 a.m. According to his account, as he drove toward the initial sighting, he saw a small, intensely bright light hovering low above the road. Initially thinking it might be a downed aircraft or a car with high beams, Johnson watched as the light suddenly shot toward him. "I remember the light engulfed the entire car. That's the last thing I saw before I blacked out," he told investigators. When he regained consciousness, his car was off the road and idling in the grass. The windshield was cracked in a circular pattern, inconsistent with a stone or animal strike. Medical examination revealed Johnson's eyes were watering and swollen, similar to a mild flash burn. His upper face showed redness and a slight burn-like irritation. Warren Hospital staff confirmed the injuries but found no long-term internal trauma. The vehicle's damage was extraordinary. The antenna, made of durable metal, was sharply bent back with a force that should have damaged its base, yet the base remained intact. The roof-mounted emergency light was cracked, and the hood bore a round dent. Most striking was the simultaneous stopping of the dashboard clock and Johnson's wristwatch at 2:19 a.m. When reset, they began ticking again, suggesting a temporary electrical Marshall-Magnetic disruption. Marshall County Sheriff Dennis Breyer immediately preserved the evidence. Photographs were taken of the vehicle and scene. Johnson was interviewed multiple times in the following weeks, and his statement never changed. Ford Motor Company engineers examined the damage but could offer no mechanical explanation for what had occurred. Not signs pointed to a possible collision, but no evidence of another vehicle or animal existed. No blood, fur, or tire marks were found. Skid marks revealed the vehicle had braked sharply, veered, and then coasted to a stop. Investigators from Kufos Center for UFO Studies, led by Alan Henry, thoroughly examined the case. Henry considered it one of the most credible he had ever encountered. The report highlighted Johnson's reliability, the physical evidence, and the lack of any apparent motive for fabrication. Attempts to replicate the antenna damage failed. Scientists and engineers, including a physicist from the University of Minnesota, were brought in to examine the car. Reproducing the exact curvature of the bent antenna without breaking it proved impossible. The windshield's glass pattern was equally unusual. Its circular shatter did not align with typical impact cases. The onboard flashlight, clipped to the dashboard, had melted in places, suggesting exposure to intense localized heat. Val Johnson was a respected deputy with an impeccable background. No disciplinary issues, no mental health concerns. and no prior interest in UFOs or paranormal phenomena marked his history. Fellow officers described him as calm, professional, and intensely private. Following the incident, Johnson gave interviews to local and national media. Soft-spoken and careful, he consistently stated, "I don't know what it was. I just know it was real." He never speculated about extraterrestrial origins or sought attention. After a brief media cycle, he completely withdrew from public scrutiny. Johnson briefly returned to duty before leaving law enforcement and relocating to another part of the state. While declining most interview requests in later years, he never retracted his account. News of the crash spread rapidly, picked up by the Associated Press, and broadcast nationwide. For weeks, the small town of Warren fielded calls from reporters, researchers, and UFO enthusiasts. The incident became a staple of radio talk shows and news specials, featured on That's Incredible Unsolved Mysteries and in numerous books and UFO documentaries over the years. Yet the core facts remained unchanged. Val Johnson was alone on a flat stretch of road. A bright light appeared, accelerating toward him. He blacked out. He was injured. The car was damaged. The instruments stopped. No local investigators, Ford engineers, or UFO skeptics ever found an alternative explanation. The Val Johnson patrol car crash stands as one of the most enigmatic vehicle-related UFO incidents ever documented. A trained law enforcement officer encountered something inexplicable, leaving behind physical evidence that continues to baffle investigators. Multiple alternative theories have been proposed to explain the incident. Some skeptics suggested Johnson might have fallen asleep or experienced a microsleep episode that caused him to veer off the road. Yet these explanations failed to account for the uniform impact damage, electromagnetic clock interruptions, and bent antenna. Other hypotheses included ball lightning meteors or a nearby transformer explosion. None of these theories fully address the timeline, injuries, and mechanical anomalies. Remarkably, even prominent UFO skeptics struggled to debunk the case. Philip Klass, typically known for aggressive critiques of UFO reports, remained notably silent, a fact some researchers interpret as quiet acknowledgement of the incident's complexity. Today, the patrol car sits on display at the Marshall County Historical Society Museum in Warren, Minnesota, drawing thousands of visitors annually. It remains in the exact condition of the night of the incident, complete with dented hood, bent antenna, and cracked windshield. The dashboard clock remains frozen at 2:19 a.m. A 2015 Minnesota Public Radio feature revisited the case, interviewing surviving officers and townspeople. The consensus was clear. Something extraordinary happened that night, and its true nature remains unknown. Decades later, local residents still recall the community's intense fascination with the mystery. Retired Sheriff Brea once stated in an interview, "We were never able to explain it, and Val was not the type to make something like this up." The case involves a trained law enforcement officer, compelling physical evidence, multiple investigative reports, and injuries consistent with high-energy exposure, all without an identified source. There are no photographs of the object, no radar confirmation, no corroborating witnesses. Yet there is the car, there is the clock, and there is the man who saw something he could never explain and never tried to fabricate. The incident remains a testament to the enduring mystery of unexplained phenomena, challenging our understanding of what might be possible beyond our current knowledge. Not Ron Johnson was standing near a line of trees on their property when he spotted something unusual, a circular object radiating a bluish-white glow. For a moment, Ron remained motionless, completely transfixed. The object suddenly began to rise, ascending smoothly into the sky, before vanishing without a sound. Only a fading light remained, leaving behind an inexplicable sensation. Frantically, Ron rushed into the house, his voice cracking with excitement as he urged his parents, Darrell and Irma Johnson, to come outside immediately. When they arrived, they discovered a perfect circle etched into the soil, glowing faintly with an almost phosphorescent quality. This eerie ring would become one of the most scientifically intriguing UFO cases in United States history. The family examined the strange formation closely. About 8 feet in diameter, the ring was slightly raised, with soil inside displaying a crusty, white, dehydrated texture. Despite its subtlety, the glow was unmistakable. Curiosity mixed with caution, they reached out to touch the ground. Immediately, Ron's mother reported a numbing sensation in her fingers. Darrell Johnson later complained of skin irritation. Over the next few days, strange symptoms began to emerge. Their eyes burned, hands tingled, and everyone experienced headaches. Ron even claimed to feel dizzy and disoriented the following morning. News of the encounter spread rapidly through the small farming town. Neighbors arrived to investigate, confirming the ring's continued glow. The soil within the circle had transformed into a fibrous, dry crust that starkly contrasted with the surrounding damp earth. Despite recent rainfall, the area remained inexplicably dry. Local authorities quickly became involved. The sheriff's deputy visited the farm, took statements, and filed an official report. Soon after, UFO research organizations like APRO and NICAP learned about the Delos ring and requested permission to study the site. Within a week, investigators arrived, collecting soil samples, photographs, and eyewitness accounts. What had begun as a strange sighting had become a significant scientific investigation, capturing the imagination of researchers and locals alike. His team's findings would puzzle scientists for years to come. Soil samples taken from the site revealed extraordinary characteristics. Laboratory analysis detected unusual levels of hydrophobic compounds, substances that repel water. Even after heavy rainfall, the soil within the ring remained completely dry. Researchers proposed various explanations, suggesting possible connections to organic material or extreme heat exposure. However, no known agricultural or meteorological process could explain these unique properties. Equally intriguing were the physical effects on human subjects. Researchers who touched the soil later reported consistent symptoms of numbness and tingling in their hands. While no long-term consequences were documented, the uniformity of these short-term reactions among independent witnesses was particularly compelling. Photographic documentation provided crucial evidence. The Johnson family, along with researchers, captured dozens of images over several months. These visual records revealed a remarkable transformation. Some photographs showed the ring as faintly luminous, while others highlighted stark contrasts in soil texture and color. These preserved images offer powerful physical support for the observed phenomena. Skeptics quickly attempted to provide alternative explanations. Some suggested fungal growth or mold, a common occurrence in rural areas. However, laboratory testing definitively ruled out such possibilities by confirming no fungal spores were present. Others speculated about potential hoaxes, but the Johnson family's consistent account and lack of media seeking or financial motivation made deception seem improbable. The UFO sighting remained the most contested element. Critics argued that stress or suggestion could have induced hallucinations. Yet Ron Johnson's description remained remarkably consistent from the first night. A silent, glowing object with a domed top, hovering effortlessly before ascending into the dark Kansas sky. When researchers cross-referenced this account with other regional sightings during the fall of 1971, intriguing patterns began to emerge. Multiple reports described similar circular craft hovering in the Midwest, lending additional credibility to the Johnson family's extraordinary experience. Around the same time as the Delos incident, researchers quietly documented observations in Oklahoma and Nebraska. While these initial reports were circumstantial, they added broader context to the event. By 1973, scientific and UFO journals had published detailed findings. The case's significance stemmed from an extraordinary combination: physical trace evidence, medical symptoms, and a credible witness family. For decades, it stood as one of the few UFO landings seriously studied by mainstream scientists. Ron Johnson, years after the event, consistently shared his experience through interviews. He always emphasized how profoundly the encounter altered his worldview. "I didn't ask for it," he would say, "but it made me understand there's more happening than what we perceive." Today, the Delos ring remains a critical reference in serious UFO discussions involving physical evidence. Lab-preserved soil samples continue to baffle researchers. Despite attempts to recreate the ring's properties through various scientific methods, these efforts have consistently failed. What makes the Delos case remarkable isn't just the sighting or the soil. It's the entire sequence: a silent, luminous object witnessed by a teenager, a perfect glowing ring left behind, physical symptoms affecting multiple people, soil exhibiting unnatural behavior, and independent laboratory results. All of this occurred on a small Kansas farm with no apparent motivation for fabrication. The Johnsons have since relocated, leaving behind an unmarked, quiet field where the mysterious ring once glowed. Yet for UFO researchers and scientists seeking concrete evidence, the Delos ring endures as one of the most compelling cases on record. No official explanation has emerged, and no known phenomenon has successfully replicated the original findings. The night of October 18, 1973, near Mansfield, Ohio, would become another significant chapter in this extraordinary narrative. Above northern Ohio, stars scattered across the autumn sky like powdered sugar over black velvet. In a U.S. Army Reserve UH-1 Huey helicopter, Captain Lawrence Coyne methodically checked his instruments. Green dials glowed steadily as the dark countryside silently unfolded beneath them. Just after 10:30 p.m., the crew continued their routine flight from Columbus to Cleveland. Specialist John Healy monitored the radio. Sergeant Robert Yanis sat as co-pilot beside Coyne, and Staff Sergeant Oreo Jezzy occupied the left rear seat. They were flying 2,500 feet above the ground, cruising steadily through military-controlled airspace. Suddenly, everything changed. Yannick spotted a red light to the west, moving rapidly toward them. "Aircraft at 10 o'clock, he called out. Coyne glanced up, expecting a standard navigation beacon from a fixed-wing plane, but this wasn't moving like any aircraft they knew. The red light closed in fast, then shifted trajectory, beginning a sharp descent toward the Huey. Coyne took the controls, initiating a dive to avoid a mid-air collision. The helicopter dropped from 2,500 to 1,700 feet in less than 30 seconds. The object mirrored their movement, altering course, and staying locked above. Then it stopped. The red light stabilized just above and in front of the Huey, no longer moving. Now they could clearly see its source. A gray metallic cigar-shaped craft nearly as large as a commercial jet, hovering completely still. From its center, a green light beam protruded, bright, well-defined, and focused directly on their helicopter. They were inside it. The cockpit was illuminated by an unnatural green glow. The light filled the cabin but cast no shadows. It wasn't scattered like a searchlight, but tight, controlled, directed. Suddenly, their instruments failed. The magnetic compass spun erratically. The radio went silent. The altimeter stopped responding. Even the controls briefly felt unresponsive. The entire crew sat in silence, each man suddenly aware that their training, logic, and assumptions about the world no longer applied. Less than a minute later, the object hovered, projected its beam, then, without a sound, shot off to the west at an impossible speed, disappearing into the horizon in less than a second. When the crew regained their senses, something felt wrong. Coyne checked the instruments. Despite descending moments earlier, the helicopter was now climbing, ascending at 1,000 feet per minute without input. It was as if the craft had lifted them. They were now at 3,500 feet, 1,000 feet higher than their original flight altitude. None of them had touched the controls. Coyne leveled the aircraft and called Cleveland Air Traffic Control. Communications had returned. He reported an unidentified object at their location. The FAA logged the call. Meanwhile, back on the ground in Mansfield, multiple civilian witnesses had seen the same thing. Note, a helicopter cruise encounter with an unidentified object near an airfield became a landmark event in unexplained aerial phenomena. A driver with her 4 children and a police officer both reported seeing a strange object with red and green lights crossing the road and hovering near treetops. The crew landed safely and immediately filed an official report with their commanding officers. Far from dismissing the incident, the Army debriefed the men through military intelligence. Both the FAA and NADA conducted quiet inquiries, yet no official explanation was ever provided. What made this incident extraordinary wasn't just the visual confirmation, but the credibility of the witnesses. These weren't amateur enthusiasts, but trained military pilots responsible for operating multi-ton aircraft with extensive experience in identifying aerial threats. Their accounts remained consistent throughout. Captain Coyne, who later received the National Enquirer's Blue Ribbon Panel Award for UFO reporting, was vetted by scientists and military officers. Until his death in 2011, he never sought fame or profit. He described the event soberly and professionally as something he simply couldn't explain. A decade after the incident, the United Nations invited Coyne to speak at a panel on unexplained aerial phenomena. He calmly recounted the details of that October night, describing the object, its beam, and how the helicopter mysteriously ascended without input. His testimony lent the topic a legitimacy rare in such cases. Investigators found no conventional explanation. No known aircraft in the area could behave as described. No military exercises, confirmed radar traffic, or weather anomalies could account for the event. The FAA verified the flight path and altitude gain, while electromagnetic interference matching the compass failure had no standard source. Skeptics proposed theories, a meteor or refueling plane, but these fell apart under scrutiny. Meteors don't hover or emit green light beams. No tanker could stop and hover silently or lift another aircraft without contact. The vertical ascent, loss of control systems, and the beam's physical behavior remained unexplained. UFO researchers highlight this case not just for its credible witnesses, but because it involved direct physical interaction that defied rational explanation. On November 23, 1953, a night of sharp cold and clear stars over Lake Superior set the stage for an extraordinary encounter. Winds whispered across the frozen water as routine radar sweeps at the U.S. Air Force's 753 Aircraft Control and Warning Squadron in Truax Field, Madison, Wisconsin, picked up an unexpected blip. The unidentified object appeared without warning at 6:22 p.m., silent and heading south over the Canadian border near Sioux Locks. No transponder, no radio contact, no flight plan. Such an unauthorized aircraft triggered immediate protocol during this sensitive Cold War period. Air Defense Command quickly scrambled a Lockheed F-89C Scorpion jet from King Ross Air Force Base. The two-seater all-weather fighter was piloted by First Lieutenant Felix Montai, a 27-year-old experienced interceptor with dozens of missions completed. Second Lieutenant Robert L. Wilson manned the radar. At 6:25 p.m., the Scorpion lifted into the evening sky, climbing toward 30,000 feet. Ground radar operators tracked both the F-89 and the mysterious object, following standard interception procedures. Years later, Jesse would recount the aftermath of their encounter with haunting clarity. The crew fell into a profound silence, understanding they had witnessed something inexplicable. Janacek admitted struggling to sleep for weeks, declaring, "I've never been the same since." The green beam was deliberate and precise. It wasn't scanning or searching, it was aimed. The occupants knew exactly where the helicopter was located. This incident became a pivotal case in both UFO literature and official military briefings on unidentified aerial phenomena. Notably, it remains one of the few cases included in both American and international reviews. To this day, no prosaic explanation exists. The US government has released no documents contradicting the crew's account, and no aircraft or technology then or now matches the description. The encounter stands as a chilling moment in UFO history, a silent visitor hovering just long enough to be seen, felt, and to fundamentally alter four men's lives before vanishing without a trace. Until 6:52 p.m., something unexpected happened during a routine mission. Two radar targets, one belonging to Monclaw's jet and the other to an unknown object, converged. Controllers watched as the blips merged into a single point on the screen. They waited for Manaba to peel away or return to base, but no second signal appeared. Just like that, both aircraft vanished. The Scorpion had been chasing the object at full throttle when this strange event occurred. Radio operators at Kinross tried calling the Scorpion but received no response. Immediate dread set in, and a search and rescue effort involving American and Canadian forces was launched. For days, aircraft and surface vessels scoured the area. They found absolutely nothing. No wreckage, no debris, no oil slick, no emergency signal. It was as if the jet had never existed. The Air Force later released an official explanation suggesting Monla's F-89 had crashed while pursuing a Royal Canadian Air Force C-47 cargo aircraft. However, this explanation raised immediate skepticism. The RCAF denied having any aircraft in the area. No Canadian plane matched the flight path. Moreover, why would an experienced pilot like Monclaw fail to identify a standard cargo plane on radar or visually? The mission was routine, yet both Monlaw and Wilson disappeared without a trace. Rumors quickly spread among airmen. Some whispered about UFOs, while others speculated about radar malfunctions or spatial disorientation causing a catastrophic collision, but no one could explain the complete absence of evidence. Aircraft crash debris doesn't simply vanish, even in deep water. The radar incident was particularly puzzling. Multiple independent operators witnessed the merger of two blips, not a crash, not a disappearance, but a literal convergence that was highly unusual, even unprecedented. In the years that followed, UFO researchers seized on the Kinross incident. Early civilian UFO groups like NICAP used this event as potential proof that the military was encountering unknown craft and losing pilots in the process. Strange documents obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests decades later added further intrigue, with one internal Air Defense Command memo cryptically referencing the mysterious disappearance. 1960, Donald Cole, a former Marine pilot with high-level Pentagon contacts, reignited public interest in a mysterious case. He argued the Air Force was conceiving encounters with extraterrestrial craft, with the Kinross incident standing as one of the clearest examples of an entire aircraft and crew vanishing. Lake Superior's extreme conditions could explain the lack of wreckage. It's one of the deepest and coldest lakes in the world, known for swallowing ships and planes. The Air Force officially claimed the F-89 went down in these treacherous waters, citing poor visibility and depth as reasons for no recovered evidence. Yet radar operators told a different story. One anonymous operator, speaking years later, described watching two targets converge in a way that defied conventional explanation. "I watched the two targets merge," he said. "It was like one just absorbed the other." In 2006, the Great Lakes Dive Company claimed to have located the F-89's wreckage using sonar. They published coordinates and images, promising a recovery mission, but within weeks, they disappeared completely. Their website went dark, calls went unanswered. Some saw it as a hoax, while others suspected something more sinister. The mystery remains unresolved. No remains of Monla's Scorpion were ever found. No Mayday was transmitted. Flight logs and radar data from that night stayed classified or missing. Theories abound. Some believe Monla got too close to a secret government project, while others argue for a simple accident. What haunts investigators is not just the aircraft's loss, but the suggestion of something in the sky with the power to make an entire craft vanish. A vehicle without a flight plan, without a transponder, ending its mission in complete silence. Certainty eludes everyone. A trained pilot and radar operator launched a routine intercept mission, locked onto an unknown target, and then simply disappeared. The radar signatures merged, and then nothing. Nothing. In the spring of 1978, something strange happened at Copley Woods, a quiet woodland area on the edge of Coventry. Eric Marston, the local groundskeeper who had patrolled these woods for nearly a decade, was about to experience an encounter that would shatter his routine. The woods marked the boundary where suburban houses gave way to a tangle of oak, ash, and bramble. Crisscrossed by paths worn smooth by years of dog walkers and schoolchildren, the area was unremarkable by day and eerily still by night. On that particular evening, Marston was making his usual perimeter check when something unusual caught his attention. A pale glow filtered through the trees ahead, unlike anything he'd seen before. At first, he thought it might be car headlights, but no road existed in that direction. At the same time on the eastern path, Linda Holt and Peter Quealy were walking their dogs. Suddenly, both animals became agitated. The collie stiffened with ears back, while the Labrador whined and strained at its leash. The walkers sensed an inexplicable change in the air, a tangible stillness. From his vantage point, Marston could now distinguish a distinct shape. It wasn't a diffuse light, but a solid spherical object with a faint glow. Moving slowly and almost cautiously through the treetops, the object descended into a clearing. When fully visible, the sphere was approximately 6 or 7 meters across. Its surface was a uniform pale white that seemed to contain light rather than emit it. A narrow, sharply defined column of light projected from its underside, sweeping across the clearing. In an era when pilots were trained to intercept unknown objects aggressively, Marston's encounter might have been with something not of this world. The lack of wreckage, the Canadian denial, and the subsequent silence from authorities only deepened the mystery of that night in Copley Woods. No, a pale sphere moved in smooth, deliberate arcs, hovering near grass and tree trunks. Hull and Quayle, watching from between branches, later described an object that was glass-like and illuminated from within, with no visible seams or openings. Marston approached the scene, stopping about 20 meters from the object. The light beam, Hull recalled, didn't spread like a torch's beam. Instead, it remained fixed exactly where it was pointed. No sound broke the silence. No engine noise, no hum, just a faint rustle of branches. The beam swept across the clearing's edge, briefly lingering before moving toward the trees. Wherever the light touched, the bark seemed to brighten subtly, as if responding to its presence. After approximately a minute, the sphere rose a meter or two, paused, and then shot straight upward at an extraordinary speed. There was no gradual acceleration. It went from complete stillness to rapid departure in an instant, vanishing into the sky without leaving a trace. When Marston entered the clearing, he found the grass flattened in an almost perfect 8-meter circle. The soil felt warm beneath his boots, which seemed strange given the cool evening temperature. Shortly after, Hole and Quirley met Marston at the main gate. They spoke simultaneously, describing the same pale sphere and its unusual scanning beam. A resident who had witnessed the light from her upstairs window contacted the police. Within 20 minutes, 2 West Midlands constables arrived, examining the clearing and noting the lack of burn marks or debris. One officer commented on the ground's warmth, but saw no signs of fire, and subsequently wrote a brief report. The following morning, Marston returned to investigate. 3 men in plain clothes were already there, photographing the site and collecting soil and bark samples. One briefly showed an identification card from the Ministry of Defense. They marked several trees with chalk and conversed quietly, completely ignoring Marston's questions. Within an hour, they departed without explanation. That same day, Hole and Quealy were interviewed separately. Both provided consistent accounts. A silent, glowing sphere, a scanning beam, and an abrupt vertical departure. Hole again emphasized the object's glass-like quality, while Cooley highlighted the eerie stillness of the air during the sighting. Over the next week, Marston observed the grass within the flattened circle grew more slowly than the surrounding area. Several tree trunks inside the circle displayed vertical streaks of pale bark. By April, small changes were becoming apparent. Local dogs behaved strangely, with Holt's dog especially refusing to approach the clearing, pulling away each time they neared it. Media interest remained minimal at best. The Coventry Evening Telegraph ran a brief piece, quoting an unnamed police source and attributing the marks to routine camping activity. No reference was made to the mysterious beam or object. The incident quickly faded from public discussion. Years passed before any renewed interest emerged. In the early 2000s, the gradual release of Ministry of Defense UFO files under the UK's Freedom of Information Act brought the case back into focus. A Defence Intelligence Staff file from March 1978 held a cryptic entry. It detailed a Copywood's Coventry visual observation of a luminous spherical phenomenon. Multiple witnesses, including trained personnel, reported animal agitation, residual ground heat, and a narrow beam activity. No conventional explanation could be identified. 3 sketches accompanied the file, one from Marston, one from Holt, and one from Cooley, all depicting a smooth sphere with a single downward-directed beam, though the soil analysis page was heavily redacted. A handwritten note in the margin read, "Trace elements unusual. Further analysis required. Classified." The final document was an internal letter recommending the case be filed under UAP, no defense significance, a term often used to quietly close unexplained cases. Whether more detailed records exist in classified archives remains unknown. For those involved, the experience remained vivid. Marston remembered clearly, telling a neighbor years later, "I wasn't random, I came here for a reason." Holt and Crawley stayed largely silent, but neither he nor Marston doubted what they had witnessed. Today, Copley Woods shows no trace of the event. The clearing is overgrown, the circle long vanished. Only those who know the story could point to the exact spot. In official records, the incident is reduced to a few sparse lines, stripped of its complexity. On the ground that night in 1978, it was far more than a simple notation. Something came, scanned, and left, with no explanation ever provided. Nor George Gorman was an experienced pilot who wanted more solo flight time that day. After receiving clearance to remain airborne, he took off in his P-51 Mustang near Hector Airport, circling the city with a Piper Cub flying about 500 feet below him. What caught Gorman's attention was a small, blinking white light moving slowly west of his position. This wasn't a typical aircraft. When he radioed the control tower to confirm other planes in the area, they reported only the Piper Cub and his Mustang on radar. The object was unusual. It had no standard navigation lights, just a single bright white light. Intrigued, Gorman decided to investigate. As he accelerated toward the light, it suddenly stopped blinking and began moving, avoiding his approach with what seemed like deliberate intelligence. What followed was an extraordinary aerial chase. The white light demonstrated remarkable capabilities. It picked up speed, climbed sharply, and always remained just out of Gorman's reach. Even when pushed to nearly 400 miles per hour, his Mustang couldn't match the object's performance. At one point, the light rushed toward him head-on, shooting above his plane at the last second, missing him by about 500 feet. The encounter lasted 27 minutes. During this time, Gorman was convinced the object displayed intelligence, with movements that were impossible for any known aircraft. At 14,000 feet, his plane stalled while the light continued upward silently before vanishing into the darkness. Witnesses corroborated Gorman's account. Air traffic controllers at Fargo and the Piper Cub's pilot and passenger all confirmed seeing the light maneuvering independently. When Gorman landed, he was visibly shaken and disoriented, but immediately filed a detailed report. Within days, the United States Air Force dispatched investigators from Project S, their first official military program studying such unexplained aerial phenomena. Gorman's encounter would become a significant record in the documentation of unidentified flying object. Their investigation began by methodically interviewing key witnesses. Air traffic controllers and the Piper Cub pilot were questioned separately, and remarkably, their accounts were consistent. Investigators then conducted a technical examination of Gorman's P-51 using a Geiger counter to detect radiation levels. The instrument showed slightly elevated readings which, while inconclusive at the time, certainly caught the team's attention. The team systematically eliminated potential explanations. Weather balloons? None were released that night. Other aircraft? No other planes had been cleared to fly in the area. Celestial bodies? Jupiter was visible, but not in the direction Gorman described. Eventually, the Air Force published a report suggesting Gorman might have been disoriented, mistaking a weather balloon for something extraordinary. They proposed that high-speed flight and changing perspectives could create optical illusions. Gorman flatly rejected this explanation. In a formal statement, he insisted the object demonstrated intelligent control. He described its impossible maneuvers, responding to his actions, dodging attempts to intercept, climbing faster than his aircraft could manage, and executing turns no known object could perform. The object's behavior was equally puzzling. It had no discernible structure, no wings, no fuselage, no sound. Unlike a balloon or flare, it maintained a perfect glow with controlled, deliberate motion. It never wavered. While the case was kept open, it was quietly deprioritized. Project Sign, later evolving into Project Grudge and then Project Blue Book, continued to document the incident. Official statements leaned toward conventional explanations, despite lacking definitive proof. Within military and aviation circles, the encounter became legendary. Gorman was a highly trained, combat-experienced pilot flying a top-tier fighter aircraft. He wasn't a fantasist or an unreliable witness, but a professional who engaged fully and described the event with precision. Multiple ground witnesses corroborated his account. Later analysts found the most disturbing element to be that Gorman had been comprehensively outmaneuvered. His aircraft, designed for tight turns and rapid climbs, was utterly overwhelmed by an object whose capabilities defied explanation. The skies over North Dakota that night held a rare mystery, one that has never been solved. The Gorman dogfight remains one of the most compelling aerial encounters in UFO history. It involved a skilled pilot, military investigation, and multiple witnesses. In 1948, over Fargo, something strange and unexplained occurred. Gorman performed with surgical precision, accelerating upward into the sky beyond his pursuer's reach. Years later, when interviewed again, he stuck to his account. He never sought publicity or wrote a book. He simply maintained that he had encountered something beyond explanation, and he wasn't alone in witnessing it. The U.S. Air Force never reopened the case. While the weather balloon explanation remained the official verdict, it never convinced those who studied the incident closely. There was no debris, no malfunction, no mistaken identity. The object had come, danced with the fighter plane, and disappeared into the sky. In retrospect, some UFO researchers have suggested the object may have been testing Gorman, examining his reactions evaluating his capabilities. If so, it chose its opponent well. Gorman gave chase, risked blackout in tight turns, and pushed his aircraft to its limits. But in the end, he was left behind. To this day, the encounter is studied as a benchmark event. No known technology in 1948 could behave as that object did, silent, agile, immune to gravity's pull. On July 24, 1948, near Montgomery, Alabama, another extraordinary encounter unfolded. At 2:45 a.m., Captain Clarence S. Childs, a decorated World War II veteran and commercial airline pilot, sat in the left seat of Eastern Airlines Flight 576. The aircraft was cruising at 5,000 feet en route from Houston to Atlanta. First Officer John B. Willett sat beside him, scanning the clear skies through the co-pilot window. Behind them, 20 passengers dozed under dim cabin lights, lulled by the steady hum of the twin engines. Then Childs saw something. At first, just a distant point of brilliance, a rapidly growing light on the eastern horizon, far brighter than any star. Within seconds, the light intensified and its source materialized into view. Childs leaned forward instinctively. "John, you see that?" Willett turned. A massive object was hurtling directly toward them, fast, bright, and totally silent. The two men froze. The night was clear when the DC-3 suddenly encountered an extraordinary object, drawing close enough for distinct details to emerge. Stretching over 100 feet long, the craft resembled a cylindrical rocket or fuselage with no visible wings or tail. 2 rows of square windows ran along its side, emitting a soft bluish-white glow. Brilliant orange and red flames erupted from the rear, suggesting a controlled propulsion system. In a split second, the object banked sharply to the right and stretched, causing turbulence that rocked the aircraft before vanishing into the darkness. The entire encounter lasted barely 10 seconds. Shaken by the experience, Chile immediately radioed the nearest control tower. No scheduled military exercises were occurring in the area, and no commercial flight paths overlapped. No aircraft, civilian or military, were expected at that altitude and trajectory. When they landed in Atlanta at dawn, both Chile and Willett filed formal reports with U.S. Air Force intelligence. Their descriptions matched perfectly. A cigar-shaped object with glowing windows, trailing fire, and no discernible wings or markings. It had passed within 1,000 feet of their cockpit, closer than any aircraft should, without a collision warning. Within days, the case reached Project Sign, the Air Force's first official UFO investigation unit. This was no simple misidentification of a weather balloon. These were trained pilots and former military officers with thousands of flying hours. Their credibility demanded serious consideration. Adding intrigue, passenger Clarence McKelvey, editor of the American Education Press, corroborated the incident. Seated near the front, he witnessed a brilliant flash and felt the aircraft jolt violently, which woke several passengers. Though he didn't see the full object, his account supported the pilot's report. Project Sign quickly classified the case as unidentified. The sighting became a centerpiece of internal debates about potential advanced non-terrestrial craft. Dr. Tesla J. Allen Hynek, an Ohio State University astronomer consulting for the project, found the case particularly interesting. Initially skeptical, he began to take the report seriously as details emerged. Neither man described features consistent with known aircraft, meteors, or celestial events. The object's characteristics defied standard explanations. Its uniform rows of windows, horizontal movement, and pilot-level altitude eliminated most natural explanations. As public interest in UFOs surged during the summer of 1948, sparked by incidents like the Kenneth Arnold sighting and the Roswell crash the previous year, the military's approach began to shift. Project Sign's initial estimate, which supported the extraterrestrial hypothesis, was rejected by Air Force Chief of Staff General Roy Vandenberg. He found the conclusion lacking sufficient hard evidence. The official narrative then changed. The Air Force revised its stance on the Chile-Willett case, suggesting the pilots had seen a fireball-type meteor. However, both Chile and Whitted rejected this explanation. In a follow-up interview, Chile was adamant, "Meteor? No, sir. I've seen meteors before. That thing had windows." He was resolute. The object was real, solid, and flew under control. Whitted agreed, emphasizing that the object changed direction, executed maneuvers, and flew away horizontally, behaviors completely unlike meteors, which typically descend rapidly in arcs and burn up within seconds. Control was the critical distinction. Both pilots stressed that the object demonstrated flight characteristics, turning, leveling out, maintaining altitude, suggesting intelligent guidance. The intense light didn't resemble meteor trails, which usually appear greenish and disintegrate quickly. Rectangular lighted windows, an apparent fuselage structure, and rear propulsion flames reinforced their argument that this was a vehicle unlike anything in the 1948 inventory. The story gradually faded from public consciousness, but researchers continued investigating as new declassified files and pilot testimonies emerged. The significant development came in 1969 with Project Blue Book's final report, the third and last official Air Force UFO investigation. While many previously unidentified cases were reclassified as misidentified phenomena or hoaxes, the chilly-witted incident remained unresolved. The Air Force maintained the meteor theory but admitted the case lacked sufficient data for definitive conclusions. In subsequent decades, aviation historians and UFO researchers have continued to examine this intriguing encounter, keeping the mystery alive. Pilots Chilly and Witted were forever changed by an encounter that defies explanation. Their sighting over Alabama during an Eastern Airlines flight became a landmark case in UFO research, notable not just for the witnesses' credibility but for the extraordinary characteristics of the craft itself. The object displayed impossible capabilities: no wings, no tail, no sound. It moved at tremendous speed, performed horizontal maneuvers, glowed with an unexplained brilliance, and seemed intelligently controlled before vanishing without a trace. Despite the incredible nature of their experience, both professional pilots never wavered in their account. Years later, I don't know what it was, but it wasn't from around here. Their story continues to intrigue aviation experts and skeptics alike. Modern investigations using meteorological databases, aircraft logs, and comparative pilot data have failed to provide a rational explanation. No conventional explanation fits the sighting. Why was this object never detected on radar? Why did it not appear on any flight logs or military schedules? Two experienced professionals had nothing to gain by fabricating such a bizarre story. This case represents a pivotal moment in UFO research. It helped trigger military interest in unexplained aerial phenomena and contributed to the formation of investigative bodies. There was no crash, no physical evidence, just a brief, inexplicable moment in the sky when something massive and brilliant appeared and then disappeared. Parallel to this, another 29th, 1980, near Huffman, Texas. Betty Landrum and two companions were not UFO hunters or conspiracy theorists. They were simply driving home on a quiet winter night along FM 1485, a narrow road cutting through dense East Texas pinewoods. The sky was close, the forest dense, with no street lamps or other cars, just darkness and wilderness. Then, suddenly, everything changed. The case remains open, a quiet foundation beneath the sprawling tower of modern UFO sightings. Two men who never stopped saying, "We saw it," a testament to an unexplained mystery that continues to challenge our understanding of what might exist beyond our known world. Cash was driving with her friend Vicky Landrum in the passenger seat. In the back, Vicky's 7-year-old grandson Colby sat buckled in. They had just finished dinner at a local restaurant and were heading home to Dayton, Texas. The scene would soon transform into one of the most perplexing UFO encounters in history. A massive diamond-shaped object hovered low over the road, its surface metallic and rough-edged. Pulsing orange-red light burst from its base, accompanied by roaring heat. No markings, insignias, or navigation lights were visible, and the object seemed silent except for the deep whooshing roar of fire beneath it. Driving became impossible. The object completely blocked their path. Vicky, a devout Christian, initially thought it might be a religious vision or the end of the world. She and Colby stepped outside briefly but were forced back by intense heat. Betty remained outside longer, observing the object until the overwhelming temperature drove her back inside. Burning her hand on the metal door handle, suddenly the object began to lift into the air. A formation of helicopters then appeared over the trees, at least 23 according to witnesses. Many were clearly CH-47 Chinooks used by the U.S. Army, with smaller UAs among them. They flanked the object in a wide arc, escorting it as it slowly drifted away and vanished into the night sky. The aftermath was severe. Within hours, All three began experiencing serious health issues. Betty was hit hardest. That night, she developed a pounding headache, nausea, and vomiting. By morning, her face and scalp were swollen, red, and blistered. Her hair started falling out in clumps. Vicky suffered burns and eye damage, while Colby experienced a rash, sunburn-like irritation, and vomiting. Betty was admitted to Parkway General Hospital in Houston and placed in isolation. Doctors struggled to diagnose her condition. Her symptoms closely resembled radiation poisoning, characterized by vomiting, skin lesions, blood cell count abnormalities, and a suppressed immune system. Her health continued to deteriorate. Not for years. After the incident, Betty Cash, Vicky Landrum, and Colby Landrum suffered from its aftermath. The women sought answers through every possible channel, contacting local police, military bases, and even their congressmen. They repeatedly asked about helicopters in the area that night, but every agency denied any aircraft were operating nearby. John Schessler, an aerospace engineer and founding member of MUFON, began investigating the case in early 1981. His comprehensive research involved interviewing witnesses, visiting the incident site, and reviewing medical records and injury photographs. Notably, Schessler found the witnesses' testimonies remarkably consistent, even when interviewed separately. He observed that these individuals were not UFO enthusiasts. They had no prior interest in the subject, no history of making sensational claims, and potentially much to lose by going public, yet they persisted. Schessler's report on the Cash Landrum UFO incident became one of the most detailed and medically supported UFO investigations ever published. In 1982, Betty and Vicky filed a $20 a million lawsuit against the U.S. government, arguing that they had either deployed or failed to control a dangerous vehicle responsible for their injuries. Their attorney, Peter Gersten, pursued the case, but it stalled during discovery. Sworn affidavits from Army and Air Force representatives denied any military helicopter or aircraft presence in the region. The medical consequences were severe and long-lasting. Betty experienced the most intense symptoms, with her injuries documented in real time by hospital records. Vicky and Colby suffered less severely, likely due to less direct exposure. While Vicky continued to struggle with chronic eye problems and skin sensitivity, Colby's physical rash gradually subsided, though emotional scars remained. The lawsuit was ultimately dismissed in 1986, with no government agency taking responsibility. However, the case became prominent in UFO research circles, capturing public imagination through television specials like Unsolved Mysteries, Strange But True, and Sightings. Betty Cash's blistered skin and hospital records became iconic visual representations of UFO encounters with tangible physical consequences. The 1980s UFO incident drew extensive speculation about its true nature. Military and scientific theories began to emerge as more attention focused on the event. Some researchers linked the sighting to Cold War retrieval missions involving foreign or unusual space technology. Others suggested it was an experimental military vehicle, potentially with a nuclear propulsion system. The significant military helicopter presence seemed to support these theories, implying an operation of considerable importance. Alternative explanations ranged from malfunctioning satellites to classified black-budget projects involving radioactive materials. However, skeptics raised significant challenges. They pointed out that a convoy of 23 helicopters should have been documented by civilian and military air traffic systems. Yet FAA records showed no unusual activity, and no additional civilian reports of helicopter sightings emerged from other locations that night. The incident's unique characteristics remained puzzling. No known U.S. aircraft in 1980 matched the diamond shape or possessed propulsion systems capable of causing the observed injuries. The object's radiation effects, heat emission, and structural design defied contemporary technological understanding. Betty and Vicky faced long-term health consequences. Betty underwent multiple surgeries for gastrointestinal damage, skin and eye problems. Vicky, previously healthy, developed cataracts, skin lesions, and vision loss. Both women consistently maintained the poor reality of their experience until their deaths, insisting the government was concealing crucial information. Betty Cash passed away in 1998 at 69, while Vicky Landrum died in 2007. Their son Colby, now an adult, rarely discusses the case publicly, but has never retracted his original statements. Freedom of Information Act requests filed through the 2000s produced no evidence of military involvement. No flight operation records from nearby bases could place helicopters in the area. Ultimately, the case remains officially unsolved. What makes the Cash Landrum incident extraordinary is its unique combination of direct human suffering, comprehensive medical documentation, and unexplained military presence. It stands as one of the few UFO events that prompted legal action against the US government, remaining a singularly compelling mystery. Not three ordinary people encountered something extraordinary, with two of them suffering permanent damage. Despite the severity of the injuries, the evidence, consistent testimony and public documentation point to a profound event, yet the government's response remains unchanged. We were not here. The incident centers on Gary Wilcox, a 27-year-old dairy farmer known for his reliability and quiet demeanor. On April 24, 1964, in Newark Valley, a quiet agricultural town in upstate New York, Wilcox was working his land as dawn broke over the Catskill Mountains. Morning mist clung to the soil, and the rhythmic hum of insects had just begun to stir. Wilcox was tending his fields and checking manure piles when something extraordinary happened. While guiding his small tractor across a secluded section of his farm, he noticed an object that would change his life forever. There, resting silently in the clearing, was an object shaped like a large white egg. Roughly 4 feet tall and uniformly smooth, it sat motionless about 75 feet from where Wilcox halted his tractor. It was unlike any farm machinery, weather balloon, or aircraft debris, with no seams, windows, or wings, just a strange white oblong pod slightly off the ground. Curious and unafraid, Wilcox approached the object. It was eerily silent and cold to the touch, despite sitting in the early morning sun. Suddenly, two small beings appeared from behind or within the object. They stood about 4 feet tall, wearing seamless metallic suits that shimmered in the weak morning light. The evidence is not based on grainy video or witness drawings, but on hospitalization records and lab tests. To this day, no official explanation has been given. The helicopters remain unidentified, and the object was never seen again. Researchers and journalists revisiting the location over the years have found no further clues. Moving with surprising grace, the beings had faces hidden behind reflective coverings. Their form wasn't quite human, but they carried themselves with an unmistakable confidence. For Wilcox, there was no fear. Instead, an overwhelming sense of calm and curiosity washed over him. When they spoke, their communication was perfect English, yet delivered in a way that felt like real-time translation. The visitors identified themselves as scientists from another plane, deeply interested in Earth's agricultural systems. They explained their specific interest in him was due to his remote farming location, a profession they viewed as fundamental to planetary health and human sustenance. Over the next 2 hours, they engaged Wilcox in detailed conversations about farming techniques, fertilizers, and human nutrition. In exchange, they shared that they were collecting data on Earth's ecosystems and conducting tests on organic materials. Wilcox later described the entire encounter as matter of fact. There were no dramatic warnings, no grand philosophical discussions, just pure scientific inquiry. The beings requested anonymity, asking him not to photograph or report their visit. Wilcox agreed. As suddenly as they arrived, the egg-shaped object lifted vertically without sound, disappearing into the sky. No heat, no wind, no dramatic light show marked their departure. Stunned but not frightened, Wilcox returned to his daily chores and told no one. Hours later, on the same day, April 24th, an almost identical incident occurred nearly 2,000 miles away in Socorro, New Mexico. Police officer Lonnie Zamora reported seeing an egg-shaped craft land and take off, leaving scorch marks behind. This event would become a significant UFO case, extensively investigated by Project Blue Book, the U.S. Air Force's official UFO research program. When Wilcox heard about the New Mexico sighting days later, he was struck by the uncanny similarities. Breaking his silence, he contacted the Tioga County Sheriff's Office. Deputies interviewed him, and Wilcox recounted every detail with remarkable consistency. The local newspaper soon picked up the story, making him an unexpected media focus. In his initial report to law enforcement, Wilcox expressed his disappointment about the encounter's aftermath. 1914. Wilcox never sought publicity after his remarkable encounter. His story unfolded quietly, with field investigators discovering faint grass impressions where the object had landed. Unlike many dramatic UFO reports, this case left almost no physical trace, just a calm man and a patch of flattened grass. Skeptics quickly dismissed the encounter as hallucination or fabrication, yet Cox's demeanor contradicted their assumptions. He never attempted to profit from his experience, refusing television appearances and paid interviews. Instead, he became increasingly reclusive, deeply changed by what he'd witnessed. Those who knew him described a man reflective and transformed, carrying the quiet weight of something profound. Years later, he mentioned an unusual detail. He'd left a package of fertilizer near the landing site, seemingly in case the beings wanted a sample. By the next day, the package had vanished. The parallels with the Zamora UFO encounter were striking. Both involved a white, egg-shaped object, occurred on April 24, 1964, and featured landings and liftoffs witnessed by credible individuals who never wavered from their original accounts. Cox's experience stood out for its unusual tone. Unlike typical UFO narratives filled with fear or aggression, his encounter was marked by calm curiosity. The beings asked questions, showing particular interest in Earth's agriculture. They didn't threaten or intimidate, they communicated. Despite its lack of sensational drama, the incident remains significant. UFO researchers now categorize such encounters as experiential studies, noting how the contact seemed almost tailored to the witness's background. The simplicity of Cox's story, paradoxically, lends it a unique credibility. As public interest waned, researchers continued quietly investigating, seeing in Cox's account a nuanced example of potential extraterrestrial interaction, understated, personal, and intriguingly complex. 9. Wilcox lived out his days in Newark Valley, occasionally speaking to researchers who contacted him but otherwise avoiding the limelight. He never tried to embellish the story, and in his few public remarks years later, he seemed thoughtful, if not wistful, about what had happened. "I don't know what they were," he once said. "I just know I didn't imagine it." No other sightings occurred at his farm, and no follow-up visits or definitive evidence were left behind. Yet questions persist. Why Wilcox? Why a farmer? Why that specific date? And what were these beings truly after? Was it simply a scientific exchange, a brief moment of mutual curiosity across worlds? Or something more, a test, a first contact? The extraordinary doesn't always arrive with thunder and light. Sometimes it comes with the gentle hum of a tractor and early sun glinting off dewy grass. Whatever the truth, Cox's story remains one of the most grounded and perplexing accounts in UFO history, a moment when the cosmos may have reached down not with fear, but with interest in our most fundamental human endeavor, growing life from soil. The non-human intelligences were testing not just biological samples, but human reactions. In October 2003, a typical day in the arid West Texas basin took an unexpected turn. A survey crew from Texas State University, graduate geologists and contracted civil engineers had set up equipment east of Highway 90 near the famous Marfa viewing platform. By nightfall, their instruments would fail, their assumptions would unravel, and they would become witnesses to something inexplicable. The group's assignment was routine: evaluate magnetic disturbances near a proposed highway expansion. Yet this desert stretch already had a reputation. For over a century, locals had spoken of mysterious lights that floated, blinked, and darted across the plains with no discernible source. On this particular evening, folklore transformed into field data, led by Dr. Kenneth Hall, a geophysics professor, and assisted by Luisa Ronda, a civil engineering technician. The crew deployed fluxgate magnetometers, seismic accelerometers, and 2 GPS track spectrometers along a 500-meter transect. Their goal was logging subsurface mineral variations and minor tectonic stress signatures. Now, as the sun dipped behind the Davis Mountains around 6:45 p.m., the research team's instruments started sending out strange readings. I noticed the first anomaly on the magnetometer, which had suddenly spiked far beyond normal levels. There were no equipment failures or nearby vehicles, just an unexplained magnetic disturbance near the probe. Initially, the team thought a solar event might be responsible, but no geomagnetic storm had been reported that week. At exactly 7:06 p.m., as the sunset's last colors faded, three spherical lights appeared on the horizon about 1.5 kilometers away. They hung motionless for several seconds before shifting into a precise triangular pattern. Dr. Hall initially mistook the lights for vehicle headlights, but then one light shot straight up at a 90-degree angle, hovered, and descended back to its original position. Another light split into 2 points, rotated, and then merged again, all without making a sound. The lights pulsed through alternating colors, white, orange, and a brief hint of green. The crew set up a Sony Handycam on a stabilized tripod to document the event. Aranda tried to capture the spectrometer display on his smartphone. However, just 2 minutes into filming, the GPS module froze. The timestamp stopped updating, though recording continued. Later, analysis revealed the file had recorded for nearly 12 minutes without accurate geolocation data. Instruments near the phenomenon began behaving strangely. Seismic sensors detected micro-vibrations from no identifiable source. Magnetometers showed impossible polarity reversals, as if the Earth itself was reacting. Hall insisted the instruments weren't simply malfunctioning, they were overwhelmed. Around 7:15 p.m., the lights started moving. They aligned in a perfect linear pattern along the research transect, with each light hovering directly above a deployed sensor. For nearly 5 minutes, they remained stationary, pulsing slowly as if observing or interacting with the equipment. Suddenly, they vanished simultaneously. The team stood frozen in silence for nearly a minute. When they finally moved, they rushed to the sensors. Some were warm to the touch despite the cool night air. One magnetometer had completely stopped logging data. The backup memory card from a seismic probe had been completely wiped clean and unreadable when analyzed in the lab. By the time the crew returned to their field office in Alpine, footage was being backed up and logs cross-checked. The raw video revealed flickering lights, with one seemingly emitting a halo effect invisible to the naked eye. Even more intriguing were the spectrometer readouts showing unexpected electromagnetic radiation surges that peaked just before each light movement. Researchers at Texas State's Geoscience Department compiled the data, which quickly attracted attention from the University of Texas at El Paso. Academic channels began buzzing about the incident, with some describing it as a potential breakthrough in understanding localized plasma phenomena, or what some called Earth lights. In early 2004, Professor Dana Whitaker led a small graduate student team back to the site to replicate the conditions. They deployed an array of scientific instruments, pressure sensors, barometers, and high-frequency EM field recorders. For 3 consecutive nights, they captured background EM levels but observed no visible light phenomena. Then, just past 2 a.m. on the 4th night, 3 team members witnessed a remarkable event. A bluish orb descended from a ridge west of the original incident location, hovered briefly, and then silently ascended into the clouds. Subsequent investigations yielded fascinating results. Soil samples from the original event site contained higher than normal concentrations of ionized silicates and trace amounts of scandium, an element previously unrecorded in the regions. Surface compositions, local vegetation showed chlorophyll suppression, which Whitaker's team theorized might result from prolonged ultraviolet radiation exposure. Scientific investigation wasn't the only source of information. Daryl Combs, a retired park ranger, came forward after reading about the survey team's encounter in the Alpine Avalanche newspaper. He recalled a similar light phenomenon during a 1983 controlled burn in the same area, a report originally dismissed as misidentified gas flares. "I know what flares look like," he insisted in a recorded interview. "Those lights," he emphasized, "moved with purpose." Rosa Mendes, an amateur astronomer who had been stargazing that night from her Fort Davis backyard, further contributed by submitting her observation log. The 2003 Marfa Lights incident remained the most scientifically scrutinized encounter on record, with video footage archived in Texas State's Earth Sciences collection. Dr. 23 Texas and a scientific league, all and Aranda were invited to present their findings at the 2005 Santa Fe Symposium, which drew both open-minded physicists and skeptical meteorologists. During the event, a compelling theory emerged suggesting that tectonic stress in areas with known fault lines could generate piezoelectric discharges through quartz-rich rock strata, potentially manifesting as visible plasma orbs. However, the precise movements and synchronized interactions with electronic equipment defied easy explanation. NASA physicist Dr. Anjali Naita, who attended the symposium, privately shared her intrigue with Hall, noting similarities to Arctic station cases involving unexplained interference and engineless lights. Her comment, "Something is out there, and we don't have the vocabulary yet," captured the event's sense of mystery. The local response was equally interesting. The Marfa City Council granted funds to encourage academic studies, and the Marfa Lights Viewing Center transformed from a tourist curiosity to an informational site referencing scientific readings from October 2003. In 2007, a peer-reviewed paper in the Journal of Geophysical Inquiry, authored by Hall, Whitaker, and colleagues, proposed an unclassified geophysical plasma phenomenon as the best working hypothesis. Their conclusion was bold. The Marfa lights were neither hallucination nor hoax, but real, measurable, and interactive. Luis Aranda, reflecting on the event in a 2020 interview, remained convinced of something extraordinary. With extensive experience in oil-field sensors and high-speed cameras, he emphasized that every recorded anomaly aligned with their visual observations. Something intelligent was here, he stated, leaving open the question of its origin. One witness had recorded 3 unidentified lights moving in a triangular formation above the Marfa plain. A logbook noted unusual characteristics: no sound, no blinking, and movement too slow for conventional aircraft. While a definitive explanation remained elusive, the scientific interest was undeniable. The Tuscumbia Lights, a small-town event from 2006 in Alabama, began like any ordinary moment but quickly became extraordinary. Nestled in a quiet corner near the Tennessee River, Tuscumbia is the type of place where doors stay unlocked, and the Helen Keller Festival marks the biggest local excitement. Not typically associated with UFO encounters, something unusual happened here in July that defied conventional explanation. Doug Carter, a former U.S. Air Force veteran, and his 15-year-old daughter Megan captured something remarkable that night. The video started grainy and shaky, with cicadas humming in the background, typical of a homemade recording. But what appeared on screen was anything but typical. 3 lights, glowing red-orange, hovered in a perfect triangle above the treetops behind the Carter family home. Their movement was unlike any aircraft Doug had ever seen. One light would drift left, stop abruptly, then return to formation. Another descended closer to the ground, illuminating pine branches before rising again, seemingly scanning the area. The scene was eerie and silent. Megan whispered to her father, "It's not moving like a plane, it's just there." Doug, with his military aviation background, knew exactly what aircraft typically looked and sounded like. These were different. Over the next week, Tuscumbia became an unlikely center for one of the most compelling yet least publicized UFO events in the American South. Though it never made national headlines, the evidence, particularly the Carter family's video, continued to circulate quietly among researchers and online communities. When the footage surfaced on YouTube in the days following the sighting, it drew attention from curious viewers, researchers, and skeptics. The video was crude but undeniably compelling, presenting a mystery that remained unexplained. Whether the result of unknown geophysical processes or something more intelligent, these lights remained just beyond full understanding, a tantalizing glimpse into the universe's endless capacity to surprise us. Not Doug Carter was clear about what he saw. Working around aircraft his entire life, he knew these weren't jets or helicopters. Something else entirely had been hovering above the terrain for more than 10 minutes. Multiple witnesses from the area corroborated his account. A retired teacher described 3 glowing dots like embers floating silently above the trees. Neighbors from 2 blocks away confirmed seeing similar lights that same night from their backyard swing. A local sheriff's deputy, speaking anonymously, reported encountering a large, low-moving object during his patrol that moved slowly across the treetops. Strange electromagnetic phenomena accompanied these sightings. When the deputy attempted to use his police radio, the signal crackled with interference and only returned to normal after the lights vanished. Days later, a similar incident occurred near the Natchez Trace Parkway. 2 fishermen on the Tennessee River watched a triangle of lights hover over the water before shooting upward and disappearing. One tried photographing the event, but the image came out blurry and overexposed. By week's end, over a dozen reports had emerged from Colbert and Lauderdale counties, Some witnesses contacted MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, who catalogued the encounters in their database. What made the Tuscumbia sightings remarkable wasn't just consistent descriptions, but the convergence of multiple factors: video evidence, diverse witnesses, and a retired Air Force veteran's report of electromagnetic interference. Investigators from MUFON and independent research groups arrived within 2 weeks. They interviewed the Carters and analyzed the original video footage. Experts noted the lights didn't match standard FAA aircraft blinking patterns or thermal signatures. Subsequent investigation revealed no scheduled commercial or military flights at that altitude. Freedom of Information Act requests confirmed no radar logs showed anything unusual, no transponder returns, no squawks, no known aircraft. Ray McCarty, a retired electrical engineer, meticulously analyzed the video using enhancement filters and frame-by-frame tracking. His analysis revealed that the 3 lights maintained a precise geometric relationship, suggesting they were either part of a single structured object or part of an extremely coordinated formation. McCarty's assessment was direct and compelling. If this is a single craft, it's enormous, quiet, and capable of hovering almost motionless for extended periods. That's not anything I've ever seen fly, he stated. Attempts to gather information from local military bases, including Redstone Arsenal and Columbus AFB, were met with minimal response. Officials consistently denied any training exercises or aircraft activity in the area on the night of July 10. When officials were shown the video, their response was terse. That does not appear to be any of our assets. A curious incident followed when Doug Carter received a visit from 2 unidentified men claiming to represent a government aviation office. They requested to view the original tape, which Carter allowed, but he refused to surrender the original file. The men were particularly interested in the shooting location and camera orientation, but provided no clear identification. The story remained largely localized, with no major newspapers picking up the account. The video gained modest traction on early YouTube before being overshadowed by an avalanche of viral content. For the Carters and Tuscumbia residents, it became a quiet, lingering mystery that the broader world seemed to overlook. Years later, during a podcast interview, Megan Carter, then in her 20s, offered a profound reflection. It wasn't just lights in the sky, she emphasized. It was something we all felt. The air changed. Time felt slower. You could feel it, watching. Her father's response was equally measured. I don't pretend to know what it was, but I know what it wasn't, and that's enough for me. Today, researchers continue to examine the Tuscumbia lights as a compelling example of an unexplained aerial event. The case checks all the boxes of a credible incident: clear video footage, consistent multi-witness reports, experienced observers, electromagnetic anomalies, and a total absence of conventional explanations. The Carters still have the original footage safely preserved and digitized, 3 lights hovering silently in ways no known aircraft could explain. But for those who witnessed it, the experience remained etched in memory. Megan Carter's life moved forward through college, work, and family, yet the night never truly left her. I don't dwell on it daily, she reflected years later, but sometimes a plane in the sky makes my heart skip a beat, because I know what I saw wasn't just another aircraft. Doug Carter continues to safeguard the original tape, now digitized and backed up. Researchers and locals occasionally request to view it. Each time, Doug watches their reactions, the quiet intensity, the long stares at those 3 red lights. Most moved on, and Tuscumbia returned to its peaceful rhythm. Yet for a few summer nights in 26, something extraordinary hung in the dark. An object that defied familiar shapes, belonged to no known program, and moved in complete silence. Was it a visitor, a test, or something beyond comprehension? No one can definitively say. In the stillness of a southern night, with crickets chirping and trees rustling softly, the sky once held a mystery. The people of Tuscumbia were witnesses to something inexplicable. The silence spoke volumes, an unspoken testament to an encounter that challenged everything they knew about the world above. Something had passed through their quiet corner of existence, leaving behind more questions than answers. The unidentified object moved steadily through restricted airspace, drawing immediate scrutiny. Multiple flight crews reported visual sightings of the mysterious phenomenon. Descriptions varied widely. One crew characterized it as an elongated, cigar-shaped light, with a golden glow and shimmering haze. Another compared it to an impossibly large stationary lantern. The object defied standard flight protocols. It wasn't following typical routes and transmitted no identification code. Safety protocols demanded swift action. Controllers closed the airport temporarily, diverting incoming flights to Ningbo and Wuxi. Outbound aircraft were ordered back to gates. Passengers received only vague announcements about operational issues, left in the dark about the real situation. For nearly an hour, the object lingered in restricted airspace, causing significant disruption. Closing an international airport in China is an extraordinary measure, and the consequences rippled across the national air traffic network. Thousands of passengers found their travel plans suddenly altered. Meanwhile, local residents reported their own observations. Suburban inhabitants described a glowing object moving slowly across the night sky. Some managed to capture blurry photographs showing a light with a hazy aura. These images quickly spread online, sparking speculation about missiles or secret aircraft. Eyewitnesses consistently emphasized the object's controlled, steady movement. Unlike a rocket's trajectory, near the airport, taxi drivers told reporters how traffic had ground to a halt as people exited their vehicles to watch. Farmers in outlying areas claimed the object hovered silently. Some observers noted the glow seemed to pulse, suggesting changes in intensity. By morning, Chinese news outlets were ablaze with the story. Headlines from China Daily and other major publications proclaimed UFO shuts down Xiaoshan Airport, a term rarely used in official reporting. The incident had transformed from an unexplained radar anomaly to a national conversation piece. 19 state media momentarily captured global attention. International news networks like CNN, BBC, and Reuters highlighted the event, describing it as potentially one of the most dramatic aviation-related UFO incidents in recent years. Yet the narrative quickly transformed. Within days, coverage inside China shifted dramatically. Official statements portrayed the airport closure as a precautionary measure, subtly suggesting possible military activities might be responsible. Online forums where initial photographs had been shared saw posts gradually disappear. Abroad, the incident remained a sensational UFO story. Within China, it faded into quiet obscurity. The Civil Aviation Administration initially claimed limited knowledge, stating only that the closure was for security reasons. Later speculation emerged suggesting the object might be connected to military tests. External analysts noted the People's Liberation Army's history of conducting secret missile and aircraft trials in the region. However, no official record definitively linked that night's events to any scheduled operation. An alternative theory proposed the involvement of a private jet without proper clearance. This explanation seemed implausible. China's private aviation sector was tightly regulated, and the scale of the airport shutdown indicated something far more significant. Anonymous sources described radar returns suggesting an object of considerable size. Two aspects make the incident particularly noteworthy. First, the unprecedented disruption. A major international airport closed for nearly an hour due to an unidentified object. Aviation authorities treat safety as paramount, and such closures are reserved only for severe threats like major storms, accidents, or unidentifiable objects. Secondly, the brief moment of media openness was remarkable. Chinese state media momentarily labeled the object a UFO, significant choice of words that was quickly retracted. Several photographs from that day remain in circulation. One image depicts a glowing object with a radiant tail resembling a luminous comet. Skeptics argue these could be long exposure shots of airplanes. However, when cross-referenced with flight schedules and approach angles, notable inconsistencies persist. Other images suggest a structured craft emitting beams, though image quality remains low. Despite the proliferation of mobile phones, surprisingly few high-quality videos emerged, leading to speculation that more substantial evidence might have been collected and deliberately withheld. In subsequent weeks, rumors circulated about Chinese military officials seizing radar logs and potentially recovering physical evidence. In the autumn of 2007, the quiet town of Siliguri in West Bengal lay nestled at the edge of India's vast tea plantations. As farmers returned home and the sun slipped behind jagged mountain ridges, the evening seemed to settle into its usual rhythm. The air carried the scent of damp earth and tea leaves, with lights flickering in hillside villages, but something would soon disrupt the tranquil night. Dozens of people would witness an event that would enter local folklore as one of India's strangest mass sightings. It began with plantation workers noticing an unusual glow in the northern sky, initially mistaking it for a bright planet like Venus or Jupiter. The hung case stood out as a remarkable intersection of civilian aviation, international travel, and state secrecy. Unlike isolated rural sightings, this event demonstrated how unidentified aerial phenomena could bring an entire airport to a halt in the 21st century. During this period, Asia experienced a rising interest in aerial anomalies. Reports emerged from India's Lida region of glowing objects near the Himalayas and from Thailand of luminous orbs. The Hudson shutdown became a pivotal moment in understanding these phenomena. Thousands of travelers experienced only frustration that night, stranded in terminals or diverted to distant cities. The deeper question lingered. What object had crossed into restricted skies with enough presence to shut down a major hub? The aviation authority maintained silence while civilian staff reportedly signed non-disclosure agreements. Foreign researchers noted that closing an airport at peak hours would cost millions in delays and diversions, a move unlikely triggered by anything mundane. Neither natural phenomena nor known aircraft fully account for the duration, visual characteristics, and radar presence. International UFO researchers continue to cite this case as one of the most credible mass disruptions caused by an unknown aerial object in modern history. In the silence that followed, no clear answer came. Only photographs, fragments of testimony, and a brief flare of media honesty remained, traces of an event China preferred to forget. To this day, the Hudson Airport UFO serves as a reminder of the fragile line between the ordinary and the unexplained. Autumn evenings sometimes hold unexpected mysteries. On this particular night, a strange phenomenon captured the attention of an entire community. Something unusual was happening in the sky above the fields. Dozens of people gathered on the cool grass, their eyes fixed upward. The object defied normal explanation, a brilliant gold and white orb hovering silently above the ground. It was large enough to be clearly visible against the darkening sky, moving with what seemed like deliberate control. Witnesses described remarkable details. The object hovered for nearly 20 minutes, shifting subtly from side to side. At one point, smaller lights appeared to break away from the main body, tracing quick arcs before rejoining the central glow. These movements were too precise to be natural, not like drifting balloons or stars. Reactions varied across the community. Some families hurried children indoors, latching windows as if protecting against an unknown threat. Others remained outside, transfixed. An elderly farmer reportedly lit incense, believing it a divine sign. Younger observers speculated about foreign aircraft or supernatural origins. The news spread rapidly through Siliguri town. Shopkeepers closing their shutters paused to look. Commuters on scooters stopped, some abandoning their rides to watch. The object was visible from multiple locations, creating a shared moment of collective wonder. Local journalists later interviewed witnesses who described the event with striking consistency. A bright orb hovering silently, breaking into smaller lights, and then vanishing without trace. By the time local police arrived, the phenomenon had ended. Officers admitted seeing a faint glow, but could provide no further explanation. The official station log merely noted a strange light reported by citizens. No investigation followed, and the incident gradually faded into local folklore. Yet for those who witnessed it, the memory remained vivid, a mysterious encounter that defied simple explanation. Several villagers claimed the next day that they had seen the orb briefly descend toward the tea fields, adding another layer of intrigue to an already enigmatic event. Lights seemed to dance and weave across the landscape, breaking into smaller clusters that darted unpredictably across the ground. Their golden illumination caught the leaves in a soft glow before the main object suddenly shot skyward and vanished, leaving behind an eerie silence. Local Bengali newspapers quickly picked up the story, running short articles with intriguing headlines about mysterious lights. Regional television stations followed, interviewing tea workers visibly shaken by what they had witnessed. Yet within days, the incident faded from national consciousness. Buried under the usual stream of political and economic news, no official explanation emerged from the Indian Air Force or Meteorological Department, but theories began to circulate. Some proposed ball lightning, though this explanation faltered given the light's extended duration and ability to split into independent moving units. Others suggested a misidentified helicopter or drone. But 2007-era drone technology in India was limited, and villagers noted the complete absence of any rotary noise. The region's strategic location added another layer of speculation. Siliguri sits near the northern frontier, close to the critical Siliguri corridor, connecting India's northeast to the rest of the country. Military analysts had occasionally reported unusual frontier lights potentially linked to foreign aircraft. However, no records confirmed Chinese incursions, and the object's silent hovering defied conventional aircraft behavior. What made this event truly remarkable was its collective nature. This wasn't a solitary traveler's unsubstantiated claim or a blurry photograph. Multiple witnesses, workers, farmers, shopkeepers, and commuters simultaneously described the exact same phenomenon. Such mass sightings are uncommon and resist straightforward explanations. In subsequent years, the incident became preserved primarily through regional retellings and scattered references in Indian UFO research circles. Some researchers now consider it one of the most significant modern sightings in eastern India, a mysterious event that continues to challenge understanding. When the night fell over a small locality in Siliguri, something extraordinary disrupted the ordinary world of farming routines and daily struggles. Local villagers still recall that moment vividly decades later, a strange, luminous event that defied explanation. Children clung to their parents, neighbors stood transfixed, and time seemed to slow as a glowing orb illuminated the plantations. The experience was more than just a fleeting light. For those who witnessed it, the event pierced the usual boundaries of their known world. No military explanation or scientific theory has fully resolved what happened that night. Instead, the incident remains an open question, a reminder that mystery can still quietly descend over a community and leave people gazing upward in wonder. Years later, a similar unexplained phenomenon occurred in Cebu, Philippines. On a seemingly routine morning in 2004, during a school assembly, something remarkable unfolded. The clear tropical sky became the backdrop for an extraordinary sight. Initially, it was just a shimmer, a bright glint catching students' attention. What began as a subtle distraction quickly transformed. Teachers initially tried to quiet the excited children, assuming it was an airplane or balloon. But as more eyes turned skyward, the atmosphere changed dramatically. Suspended above the schoolyard was a glowing sphere, remarkable for its presence in full daylight. Witnesses described it as a fireball, yet fundamentally different from any meteor they had encountered. The object hovered motionlessly, emanating a steady golden-white glow. A faint haze seemed to ripple around its edges, as if heat were distorting the surrounding air. Unlike typical meteors that blaze briefly and vanish, this object lingered, defying conventional understanding and leaving observers in a state of collective amazement. Children screamed and scattered across the schoolyard, some running back to classrooms while others clung to their teachers. Adults watched, visibly unnerved, as the strange sphere hovered silently overhead. Multiple witnesses described the object moving with an eerie precision, stopping abruptly and shifting side to side in sharp, deliberate motions. The sphere hung in the sky for several minutes, emitting no sound, no roar of engines, no crack of thunder, just silence, punctuated by the frightened cries of school children. A few brave students later claimed they saw rays of light emanating from the object, spreading out like fans before retracting, though no one could confirm whether these were actual projections or mere tricks of light and glare. Then, in an instant, the object accelerated upward and vanished into the sky's brightness. But the phenomenon wasn't limited to the school grounds. That morning, residents across Cebu City reported seeing a glowing ball. Local shopkeepers, GP drivers, and office workers spotted it, some during their commute, others from fields on the city's outskirts. Within a brief window, hundreds, possibly thousands of people witnessed the same bewildering sight. News spread rapidly. Local radio stations fielded calls from listeners describing their experiences. Regional newspapers ran stories, often characterizing the event as a daylight fireball. Officials were quick to offer explanations, suggesting it was either a meteor entering the atmosphere or a weather balloon reflecting sunlight. However, these explanations rang hollow. Teachers from the school, Respected community members publicly challenged the official narrative. One teacher told journalists she had stood in the courtyard, hand shielding her eyes, watching the sphere hover silently above the children. She was certain it was controlled, not simply drifting. Meteors typically appear for seconds and travel in arcs, not hovering in place. Weather balloons rise steadily with the wind, not darting sideways or shooting upward at impossible speeds. Parents, hearing their children's accounts, added their voices to the growing chorus of witnesses, further complicating the mystery of that strange morning in Cebu City. What began as a panic-driven local story gradually faded into rumor as national media approached the incident with caution. Coverage labeled it an unconfirmed aerial sighting. Hampered by the scarcity of photographic evidence in an era when mobile phone cameras were not ubiquitous, skeptics quickly dismissed the accounts as exaggeration. Yet the sheer consistency of testimonies from dozens of children and multiple adults lent a weight that could not be easily ignored. Years later, UFO researchers in the Philippines meticulously collected stories from those present during the event. Many witnesses recalled the emotional intensity of that moment, the fear, the awe, the profound sense of vulnerability under the gaze of something unknown. Students, now grown, spoke of how vivid the memory remained. For them, it was a defining childhood experience they struggled to reconcile with the mundane explanations offered afterward. The Cebu incident fits into a broader pattern of daylight UFO sightings across Southeast Asia. In the early 2000s, reports from Indonesia and Thailand described luminous spheres seen in broad daylight, often hovering over populated areas. Unlike night sightings, these events carried more credibility because the objects were clearly visible against the daytime sky, impossible to mistake for stars or distant aircraft lights. The scale of the incident is particularly striking. While a single witness might be mistaken, or a small group could misinterpret what they see, when an entire schoolyard and city residents report the same hovering object, the weight of testimony becomes difficult to dismiss. The lack of official follow-up investigation remains one of the most frustrating aspects of the case. With so many witnesses, one might expect radar checks, a formal inquiry, or at least an acknowledgement. Instead, silence preserved the event primarily through oral accounts and scattered local reports. For the children present that morning, the image remains permanently etched, a glowing sphere descending silently, holding their attention with a mix of fear and wonder before vanishing into the heavens. Teachers were forced to confront something inexplicable, facing young, questioning faces. For the wider community, it became another piece of local lore recounted at gatherings and passed down through conversations. It was not a meteors, for meteors burn and fade quickly. Something else hung in the sky over Cebu that day, leaving more questions than answers. Night in the quiet rice fields of West Java, something extraordinary interrupted the everyday rhythm of life. A morning like any other in January 2011 near Yogyakarta took an unexpected turn. Farmers tending their crops and children running along narrow paths suddenly found themselves witnesses to an inexplicable phenomenon. The night before, residents of Sleman district had reported unusual lights in the sky, glowing orbs hovering silently above the fields, shifting and then vanishing. Some thought they were festival lanterns, others dismissed them as aircraft, but the morning revealed something far more mysterious. A perfect geometric circle stretched nearly 70 meters across a rice paddy, its design etched with a precision that defied natural explanation. The rice stalks were flattened in an intricate floral pattern that could not have been created by chance or weather. Crowds quickly gathered, farmers stood at the formation's edge in disbelief, and children raced along its intricate edges. By midday, news had spread to Yogyakarta. Journalists arrived with cameras, and aerial photos soon appeared in Indonesian newspapers. The circle bore striking similarities to crop circles long reported in England, geometric, symmetrical, and executed with an almost supernatural accuracy. For the local residents, this discovery carried deep cultural significance. The formation was more than just an unexplained pattern in a field. It was a moment that challenged their understanding of the world. Like the Cebu fireball in the Philippines, this was a story told not through a single account, but through the overlapping memories of hundreds of witnesses. Something had come, revealed itself briefly against the clear tropical sky, and then disappeared, leaving behind only questions and the lasting impression that for a brief moment, something unearthly had been watching. In the rice fields of Java, a mysterious pattern emerged overnight, sparking intense curiosity and debate among local villagers. The intricate design, imprinted in the sacred fields traditionally dedicated to Dewey, the fertility goddess, immediately drew both awe and concern. Police cordoned off the area to manage the growing crowds, while scientists from Gajah Mada University began their investigation. Botanists meticulously examined the rice stalks, observing they were flattened in an unusual manner, suggesting exposure to extreme heat or pressure. Slight scorching at the base of some stalks added to the intrigue. Meteorologists dismissed natural weather phenomena as a potential explanation. No storm or wind could account for such a precise formation. Local officials remained cautious, with the district chief calling it a complete mystery. Police worked to quell rumors ranging from UFO landings to military experiments or elaborate hoaxes. The complexity of the design and the absence of any visible tracks challenged conventional explanations. Creating such a large, symmetrical pattern overnight without detection seemed impossible in this rural setting. By the second day, the site had transformed into a pilgrimage destination. Thousands of visitors flocked to the field, some offering prayers, others capturing photographs. Enterprising vendors lined the roads, turning the mysterious event into a local spectacle. As crowds swelled, farmers grew concerned about potential crop damage. Police eventually established barriers to limit access. The incident quickly gained international attention, with Reuters publishing images that circulated globally. Western media immediately labeled it a crop circle, drawing parallels to similar phenomena in Europe. UFO researchers noted the significance of reported lights in the sky the night before, suggesting possible connections to unidentified craft. Skeptics proposed human intervention, though villagers found it hard to believe anyone could create such a complex design without being noticed. The mystery deepened with witness accounts of strange orbs hovering above the fields around 10 p.m. Multiple villagers reported seeing these unexplained lights, adding another layer of intrigue to an already perplexing event. What remained clear was that something extraordinary had occurred in these sacred rice fields, challenging understanding and sparking widespread speculation. On a quiet night in Slayman, something extraordinary happened. Farmers reported a sudden flash of light, like lightning without storm clouds. The next morning, a mysterious formation appeared in the sacred rice fields. Scientists from Gajah Mada University investigated the site. Their preliminary observations were intriguing. Rice stalks were bent at unusual angles, with slight discoloration at their bases, suggesting exposure to an intense energy burst. While they avoided definitive conclusions, they couldn't explain the formation through conventional means. Government officials tried to downplay the incident, suggesting a man-made explanation without providing evidence. Yet the local community knew something unusual had occurred. Within weeks, national headlines moved on, but the memory remained vivid for Slayman's residents. The West Java Rice Field Circle became one of Southeast Asia's first major crop circle events to attract global attention. Unlike the well-known fields of Wiltshire, England, this incident felt fresh and unprecedented. It connected global mysterious geometric field formations with local cultural experiences. Skeptics proposed that hoaxers could have created the design using boards and ropes. However, eyewitness accounts of strange aerial lights, the absence of footprints, and the formation's precise geometry challenged this theory. Even if deliberately crafted, such an operation would have required extraordinary coordination in a tight-knit rural community. For those who witnessed the circle, the effect was undeniable. Something seemed to have descended, pressed a message into the landscape, and vanished into the night sky. The villagers might not have agreed on its meaning, but they all recognized its profound strangeness. More than a decade later, photographs of the Slayman crop circle continue to circulate among researchers and believers, adding another chapter to Indonesia's growing catalogue of unexplained phenomena. West Java experienced a mysterious event that left an indelible mark, with stories of glowing orbs in the mountains and volcano sightings adding to the intrigue. At its center was a sacred rice field, transformed overnight with flawless geometric precision. As time passed, the circle gradually withered, the rice growing and eventually being harvested. Only memories and photographs remained of that extraordinary moment. Yet for those who witnessed it, the impression stayed vivid and undiminished. In 1999, a similar extraordinary event unfolded at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. The facility, less than a year old, stood as a gleaming symbol of Malaysia's modernization, with its control tower rising above the runways like a futuristic beacon. Flights from across Asia and Europe converged here, and air traffic controllers maintained their usual steady routine. That evening began like any other, with calm skies and clear visibility stretching for miles. A routine radar scan suddenly detected something unusual, a contact that didn't match any flight plan. Moving at a steady pace across an approach corridor, the unidentified object initially seemed like a software glitch. But when a second radar scope confirmed the contact, controllers grew alert. Radio calls went out to nearby commercial pilots. One captain inbound from Paniang reported a glowing disc-like object hovering above the horizon, brightly visible against the day's fading light. Another pilot corroborated the sighting, describing a luminous oval with a pale halo, moving without standard navigation lights or beacons. The situation rapidly escalated. Controllers diverted 2 flights away. Within moments, the contact shifted direction, with a maneuver impossible for conventional aircraft at that altitude and speed. No amount of official dismissal could erase the quiet awe inspired by this inexplicable intrusion into restricted airspace that night. Reports emerged about a metallic object reflecting sunlight while emitting a faint glow. No sound, no contrail, just an unnatural presence detected on radar. Supervisors in the control tower reached out to the Malaysian Air Force for help. Whether fighter jets were actually launched remains unclear. Some accounts say planes were dispatched but failed to intercept the object before it vanished. Other reports suggest military personnel simply monitored the incident remotely. Avoiding direct engagement, the radar blip hovered for nearly 30 minutes before accelerating out of range at an incredible speed. Most passengers knew nothing about the unusual event. Delay announcements used vague language about traffic management, but rumors spread among airport staff. Whispers of a UFO circulated between controllers and technicians. Later that night, local residents near the airport reported seeing a strange, brilliant light moving silently across the sky. By morning, local newspapers carried brief reports of an unidentified aerial phenomenon that caused temporary flight disruptions at Kuala Lumpur International. Headlines carefully used the term UFO, but the implication was unmistakable. Something unknown had entered Malaysia's busiest airspace. 2 pilots' confirmations fueled the story's spread through regional media. Officials quickly moved to manage the narrative. The Department of Civil Aviation issued a statement calling the radar return an anomaly and suggesting visual reports might be atmospheric reflections. When questioned about flight diversions, spokespeople claimed routine precautions. Despite avoiding direct mention of Air Force involvement, off-the-record comments from military personnel hinted at their alert status. Speculation ran wild. Some proposed it was a foreign reconnaissance aircraft testing Malaysian defenses, but the object's characteristics, no noise, no contrails, unusual lighting, contradicted this theory. Weather balloon explanations fell flat, as balloons cannot execute the abrupt course changes described. The most persistent explanation remained an unidentified flying object, supported by consistent witness testimonies that intrigued UFO researchers across Southeast Asia. The Kuala Lumpur incident stands as one of the strongest cases of the decade, far from a typical rural sighting or isolated encounter. This event unfolded over one of the region's largest airports, involving multiple professional witnesses, radar operators, pilots, and air traffic controllers. The decision to divert flights signaled that authorities viewed the object as a genuine threat to air safety. Years later, aviation insiders in Malaysia would quietly reflect on that night. Retired controllers spoke with a mixture of frustration and wonder, describing a radar return that defied explanation. The object seemed to play with expectations, appearing and vanishing in ways no conventional aircraft could. One described it as a disk of light moving with clear intention, a description echoed by the first reporting pilots. Official records remain conspicuously absent. Public requests for radar logs have gone unanswered, and media archives contain only the briefest mentions, yet the memory persists among those who experienced it. This remains one of the rare instances where a major Southeast Asian airport was directly impacted by an unexplained aerial object. The incident forced flight diversions and drew attention from both civil and military authorities. In hindsight, the Kuala Lumpur radar intrusion reveals how vulnerable even advanced systems can be when confronted with the unknown. Airports operate on precision and predictability. Flight paths intersect like clockwork. Radar sweeps the skies in steady rhythm. But on that evening in 1999, everything was disrupted by a single luminous intruder. Silent, uncooperative, effortlessly crossing restricted airspace. For the controllers tracking the mysterious blip. For the pilots witnessing the glowing disk above the horizon. For the passengers delayed without explanation. The night remains unresolved. No aircraft was identified, no report filed publicly. No conclusion offered. What endures is the fundamental fact that a major international hub was disrupted by something beyond recognition. A fleeting firefly of light against the Malaysian sky, vanishing before answers could be found. The harbour bustled with typical maritime activity. Engines droned, metal clanged, and waves slapped against docked boats. Fishermen unloaded their catch while dock workers moved cargo, the harbour lights shimmering across dark waters. Amid this ordinary scene, something extraordinary unfolded. Just after dusk, as fishing crews returned to port, witnesses observed a luminous disk hovering silently above the water. Initially mistaken for a helicopter, the object quickly revealed itself as something entirely different. Fishing crews first noticed the strange light. As they drew closer, they realized this was no ordinary aircraft. The light remained too steady, its shape too precise. Suspended a few hundred meters above the sea, a bright metallic disc caught everyone's attention. Witnesses described the craft in remarkable detail. Its circular form had a luminous edge that seemed to glow faintly. The body reflected the last sunlight like a mirror, while simultaneously emitting its own radiance. One fisherman compared it to a massive lantern hung in the sky. The scene drew increasing attention. Dock workers abandoned their cargo. Taxi drivers stepped out of their vehicles. For several minutes, the object remained motionless above the harbour. Then, without warning, it moved with impossible speed and precision. The object's movement stunned onlookers. It shifted abruptly to the side, covering a distance no known aircraft of that era could match. Witnesses gasped at the sudden, precise maneuver. Inside the local Coast Guard office, radar operators detected the object. Their equipment confirmed a solid contact, but the blip vanished as quickly as it appeared, darting off the screen at an unimaginable speed. The following day, Nagata newspapers carried short reports. Headlines spoke of mysterious lights and strange objects. Dock workers and seamen shared their accounts, adding to the intrigue of an unexplained maritime encounter. A luminous, disc-shaped craft appeared over the Nagatada port, capturing local attention and sparking intrigue. Radio stations quickly picked up the story, interviewing witnesses who described something extraordinary. A light larger than a helicopter, brighter than any plane, moving in ways no known aircraft could. The initial media buzz faded quickly, but the story didn't die. For years afterward, those who witnessed the event continued discussing it in seaside taverns. Fishermen would recount their experiences over drinks, and their accounts remained remarkably consistent even decades later. These witnesses were adamant this was no conventional aircraft, star, or planet. Some interpreted the event through cultural lenses, seeing it as an omen connected to Japanese folklore about sky visitors and maritime portents. Others believed it represented a genuine craft from beyond Earth, briefly appearing before vanishing into the night. Skeptics offered alternative explanations pointing to the Cold War context. Japan's western coastline was a surveillance frontier where Soviet and American forces operated frequently. Yet, the object's characteristics, its luminous quality, complete silence, and abrupt acceleration defied conventional explanations. No known jet or helicopter from the 1970s could hover silently and then accelerate out of sight in mere seconds. This sighting wasn't isolated. It fit into a broader pattern of maritime UFO encounters worldwide during the Cold War. Similar accounts emerged from sailors in Norway, Brazilian fishermen, and Pacific naval crews. Luminous discs appeared over water, often near harbors, demonstrating speeds and precision beyond existing technological capabilities. While smaller fishing villages along the Sea of Japan occasionally reported similar phenomena, the Nagatada incident stood out. Unlike rural sightings, this occurred